OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Bang on 7:30 this Tuesday morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed after finally getting some sleep. Hello to you, Owen Sheehan, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
I'm good. I managed to get some sleep last night as opposed to the previous night where, you know, the alarm was on, but I wasn't sure if I had already slept through it. No, I have to get up and check. Is it on? Yes, it's on. No, it's the middle of the night. Don't just go back to sleep. You must go back to sleep. And then, anyway, look, that's too boring. What's actually happening is that Liverpool got beaten last night in a game where they had 94 minutes, including stoppage time, to come back from a single goal, and they couldn't do it against the Southampton side that, you know, are decent, but Manchester United got it done against them. So what's going on, Owen?
What's going on is right. This has been quite the season, and there has been many fears from a neutral perspective over the last few weeks that Liverpool could just click into fourth or fifth gear and pull away from the pack. The 7-0 against Crystal Palace, you're thinking to yourself, okay, here's where they go 10, 12 points clear come the end of January. Here's when it's going to happen. And it hasn't happened. It's gone the other way. I think this morning we need to say a big welcome back to Liverpool fans. Welcome back to the pack. Welcome back to all of our levels of mediocrity. It is great being mediocre. Like, watching this title race is this chaotic thing. It's like the pod racing in Star Wars The Phantom Menace, where it's so crazy that it's definitely really, really bad, but it's also really enjoyable. And this title race, anything is going to happen over the next couple of weeks. Anything will happen over the next couple of weeks. And last night's results just allows us to get into this gear of knowing that this is going to be a crazy title race, or at least hoping at the very worst. So what actually has happened to Liverpool here? Well, first of all, they got done by a pretty good Southampton team yesterday. And secondly, it kind of seems, or it has seemed at times this season, that they've looked a little bit like the inverse of Manchester City, where they've been coming towards a stage where they've managed to find goals, banging in 7 against Crystal Palace, as mentioned, and now they've struggled to actually create the opportunities to put the ball in the back of the net against Southampton, despite having enough possession to do so. And I think there were warning signs of this earlier in the season. Like, you had Diogo Jota really saving them against Sheffield United and West Ham. They should have won those games by a bigger margin, but they get second half goals from Jota in those games. And you kind of felt that, okay, Jota's bailed them out here. They're going to start humming soon. And that just hasn't happened consistently. And the gaping hole of Jota on that bench or in the starting 11 now is really noticeable, which is kind of a remarkable thing that a new signing would have this impact by not being there for Liverpool.
So what do they do? Because what you're saying is it's not actually just a problem with the defence, which is a knock-on from having Virgil be injured, that actually it's the attacking trio who, you know, this time last week we were saying are the best attacking trio in world football, and Bobby Firmino's back scoring goals, and sure, look, once he's doing that, all is well. They're unstoppable.
Yesterday was probably the most worrying performance from that front three, and it was probably coming. They're probably going to be absolutely exhausted at this point, especially after the Jota injury, and it is unfair to put the blame on their shoulders, considering the players behind him probably need to be doing a little bit better. Like, the player who's getting slammed more than any other over the last 12 hours or so has been Trent Alexander-Arnold. Gave the ball away 38 times in the game last night. I think that stat probably doesn't paint a picture that Liverpool crossed the ball quite a lot last night, and maybe he's being targeted unfairly. But there are other elements of the team being targeted. The problem is your front three are the front three that are world class, that are indisputably world class. You can give a free pass to a team that has Jordan Henderson filling in at centre back, potentially a midfield that isn't first choice by dint of the fact that Jordan Henderson is playing centre back, and therefore the responsibility then lies with your front three, your first choice front three, who just did not fire last night. Now, Klopp obviously is complaining about Sadio Mane not getting a penalty. His battle against Kyle Walker-Peters last night was just fantastic. I'm not sure about the fact about the penalty, but one of the things that Klopp decided to do last night, and a very deliberate thing that he decided to do last night, was not playing his kids at centre-back, or one of his kids at centre-back, i.e. Reece Williams or Nat Phillips. And did you then take out Jordan Henderson from the midfield, which had an impact on the service that the front three were getting? Maybe. Or maybe actually they just fell completely flat last night, and no matter who was in that midfield, things would have turned out the way they did. Was it a penalty? Should Mane have had a penalty? I didn't think so. looking at it again this morning, and there's a still image which doesn't look good for Kyle Walker-Peters whatsoever. It looks like possibly it was a penalty. I don't remember it being a big song and dance when it happened, kind of like the Bednarek handball. But Klopp has singled out both of those things afterwards as bad decisions, and he has brought up Manchester United and the amount of penalties that they've been given over the last few weeks, which means one thing and one thing only: we have a title race. It means Manchester United, you can welcome yourself to the title race party right now, because Jurgen Klopp has been thinking about you a little bit, has been thinking about the amount of penalties that you've got. And I think maybe as a society, we need to be ready for this. We need to be ready for the awakening from a slumber that Manchester United fans have experienced yesterday. Like, we've got to go back to 2012, 2013 to the last time we felt something like this, where we had cocky, arrogant Manchester United fans in our lives. They are back. They feel they're in a title race. They will go top if they win their game in hand. We need to be ready for this. We need to put in place protocols to ensure that we're ready for this. Like, the reality here is that we could have a sort of 2009-esque title race where it's United versus Liverpool and things get very tasty. The other alternative here in option C is that Manchester City's form is actually to be believed, and they are the ones that actually pull away, which is kind of the boring alternative here.
Yeah, well, look, you want it to go down to the last couple of weeks of the season. For me, that's what a title race means. I don't accept one team winning by 8 points, with those 8 points kind of being the gap sometime in March. It has to be at the end of April, still a game where the league can change hands depending on results. That's the proper definition, and if we get that, then I think everybody will be particularly happy. Do you buy the conspiracy theory that the Premier League have been ordering their referees to give Manchester United more penalties to Manchester United to help support the flailing brand that is Manchester United?
100%. It's definitely true. You can't make a case that it's not true. There is, if you take off any referee's jersey, there was a Manchester United jersey underneath there. Jurgen Klopp is dead right. There needs to be an investigation done.
Well, you say this, right? You say, explain to me then why it's been 5.5 years that Klopp has been in charge, been 2.5 years that Solskjaer has been in charge, and Solskjaer has had the same, if not more, penalties in his time in the Premier League at Manchester United than Klopp has had, despite the fact that Liverpool have had 330 odd. I'm reading the tweets, the same tweets that Jurgen Klopp is, which is bizarre, by the way, that they're getting their comms from angry fans on Twitter. That's as an aside, but it is. I mean, when you see it on Twitter, you're like, what's going on? Is this now? No, has anybody second sourced this? Because huge if true, I believe, is the meme.
I think that this is probably a bigger story because of the way Paul Pogba went down for that penalty against Aston Villa last Friday night. You're an Aston Villa fan. So how did you feel when Paul Pogba went down? Did you feel that there was a sense of injustice around that? Or like, did you feel that Paul Pogba fouled Paul Pogba to get Manchester United a penalty? I don't know the rules of football anymore. I've been watching it since I was 6'5", and 37 years. I don't know what the rules of football are anymore. So I'm like, literally, when the Villa have been screwed and also had good VAR experiences this year, and every time it unplugs your feelings about the game immediately. You're like, and then stuff happens and you're like, okay, well, I can't care about this anymore because I don't understand it. So that's I completely. It's a dissociative state that you get into when VAR happens. You're like, well, okay, what's the point of this anymore? If we're going to use statistics, can I just throw one back at you? So this is the season where penalties received is supposed to have gone through the roof. Of course, we had that complete, more chaos when it came to the penalties being given at the very start of the season. So you look at the penalties received in 2020-21 in the Premier League season. Leicester City are top with 10. Then in second place, joint second place, are Brighton and Manchester United, both with 6. And then Liverpool are below them on 5. So there's only one of a difference in this season's Premier League. So, of course, over the last few years, you could say there's been some sort of, there's been something weird going on. Are Manchester United players diving more? Are they getting the better run of the green when it comes to more lenient referees? You're fair enough to ask those questions. But in this season, which has seen like a crazy amount of penalties given at the start, there's not too much of a difference between them. So it's interesting timing. And I would say that the timing is because of the way Manchester United got their penalty last Friday. And that is because Paul Pogba probably made the most of his opportunity. And Liverpool players have done that plenty of times themselves. Like Sadio Mane, Mo Salah have made the most of opportunities to get penalties, because if you don't go down, chances are the referee won't actually go to the monitor or actually won't have a look at the penalty themselves. So I don't really blame the players in those situations. But in terms of there being a conspiracy happening this season when it could be Manchester United versus Liverpool in the title race, I don't think so whatsoever.
And you don't think that Klopp has any point about the fact that Solskjaer has had as many penalties, half the amount of time, fewer touches in the penalty area, and yet Manchester United, these things even each other out. So over the course of a season, or 2 seasons, or 3 seasons, or 4 seasons, or 5 seasons, no, they don't even themselves out. That's why, I don't know, there was definitely in the early stages of the Ferguson era, there was, if you think the referees made a bad decision, you get after him. And then they had that famous one where they chased, was it David Ellery around? I can't even remember who it was. It wasn't David Ellery, it was somebody else. They chased him around, and then after that they kind of calmed down a little bit. But it was a concerted effort to get at referees, to put pressure on them, to bring that part of the dark arts to your game. And
sure,
maybe everybody else needs to do it too. Or I don't know. It's a very strange statistical, if it's a fact, because again, I'd say all our sources, that one guy on Twitter who's looked it up and put it out there, and I'd be interested to see if Liverpool have official stats kept on this themselves in their analytics department, and I'd like to see those published. I'd love to see them go to war on this. That'd be interesting.
But the thing is, if you're getting wound up about this as a Liverpool fan, you're getting wound up about Manchester United last season. Of course, these things even themselves out over the course of a season. That's a cliche that gets thrown out here. But we're talking about things levelling themselves out over the course of 4.5 years here. Why is Manchester United 1920 in the head of Jurgen Klopp? Because that is where the statistical anomaly lies. They got 14 penalties last season, whereas Liverpool only got 5. That's where the difference lies. But last season, Liverpool won the league by 50 million points. Why is Manchester United's performance last season of note now? This season, they've only got 1 more than them. There's been a massive pandemic as well before, in the midst of all of this. Last season, and the amount of penalties clocked up is quite some time ago. I don't understand the relevance of that to the current conversation that we're having. Again, to say it, I think it comes down to how Manchester United got the penalty last Friday night. I think the conversation around United and their penalties had gone away a little bit until Paul Pogba went down fairly easily. I think fair enough if it's Liverpool versus United and they've been going toe-to-toe for the title for the last 4 years. They haven't. United have been crap. They've just managed to get a lot of penalties.
0879 180 180 is the number. You can WhatsApp us on that. You can text us on that number if you want, and we'll read them out. We'll get some of your comments a little bit later on as well. Richard Redball says it was the same rule when you were 5. You trip somebody in the box, then it's a penalty. I mean, you trip somebody in the box, they fell over themselves, they tripped themselves. It wasn't always exactly, and sometimes you could batter people and penalties weren't given. I was looking back at the game in Lansdowne Road where Shay Given rugby tackled, was it Van Nistelrooy at that stage? And we didn't concede a penalty for whatever reason that day. Anyway, let's move on. Phil Egan, good morning to you.
How are you doing?
So Liverpool still joined top of the Premier League table this morning, and I'd say the Liverpool fans are pretty happy about that fact.
Well, I think they've done well to get to this stage. Just going back on what Owen said about the penalties, and why is Klopp mentioned United, is it not try and plant that seed of doubt into whoever is taking charge of the Liverpool-United game on the 17th of January, that when that decision comes, if there's one to be made, if someone has to go over to a VAR monitor, will those comments from Jurgen Klopp be in the thoughts of the referee's head? Maybe not. But football is a funny way of working things out, that there's bound to be a penalty at Anfield now on the 17th. It'll be, the way things are going for Liverpool, it'll be awarded to Manchester United. But I think, obviously, the conversation is always about Liverpool and Manchester United, just given the rivalry. But Manchester City are just, look at their next 6 fixtures, 6 winnable games. Then the 7th game is against Liverpool. And I would imagine by the time they head to Anfield, they'll be top of the league. And City have shown under Guardiola, once they're top, that's it. They're not going to relinquish that. Whereas last season, Liverpool got the march on them early and never looked back. But yeah, I think City are now starting to just creep in under the radar, and maybe United beating them tomorrow in the League Cup could put a seed of doubt in their minds. But yeah, we've got ourselves a really cracking title race by the looks of things anyway. And how worried are the Liverpool fans about what they're seeing and what they saw last night in particular? Yeah, I think you'd have to be worried, because the pattern from last night's game and the Newcastle and West Brom games is basically those three teams said to Liverpool, you can have the ball in wide areas, put the crosses in, but we've got so many men in the box that we're just going to clear everything. How many times did you see Liverpool get down? It was more than the left, because Trent Alexander-Arnold had an awful game last night. I mean, the stat going around that he gave the ball away 38 times. I mean, the first thing he did yesterday was he put the ball straight out of play. The second thing he did was he got caught out for the goal. But Liverpool got down the wings, he just couldn't find that final ball. And it was the same against West Brom. It was the same against Newcastle. They just don't look like they're going to score goals at the moment. Jota obviously was the player that was after freshening things up in that front three when he came in from Wolves, but he's out injured and they're crying out for him at the moment. Now, the problem as well is the FA Cup always seems to just happen at the wrong time for Liverpool. They're playing Villa away. We know what happened the last time they played Villa. Klopp doesn't really go full tilt for the FA Cup. He's going to rest players. So it just means now, by the time they play United, there's a good chance they'll have gone 4 games without a win. I think back to last season, they lost to Watford and Atletico, and then that Chelsea FA Cup game came around. They lost that. The season before, they were beaten by City at the Etihad. Then they got knocked out of the FA Cup by Wolves. It never seems to come around at a decent time, but I think even the most optimistic Liverpool fans would struggle to make a case for Liverpool beating Villa this weekend.
Really? It's only Villa. It's still only Villa.
Well, Villa have been pretty good this season. So, and Liverpool's away form is dismal. They're only 2 wins away from home this season. 1 against Chelsea, 1 against Palace, and 7 goals against Palace. Remember before that game, thinking this is a fixture that could be quite tricky for Liverpool, and they obviously were so efficient that day. They're not efficient at the moment. They just didn't create chances last night. At least against Newcastle, Salah had a couple of chances, but last night they were all half chances. And Fraser Forster must have been thinking, this is a handy enough night for me. He's a very good record against Liverpool, but yeah, the West Brom game and last night as well, just not creating good chances. And the only thing is, maybe the United game is the kind of game that they need. They've never lost back-to-back league games under Jurgen Klopp. It's at home. Liverpool have only dropped 2 points at home all season. They've had the upper hand against United at Anfield the last couple of seasons. Maybe it's the game they need to get the juices flowing again. But I would definitely agree with what Jamie Carragher said in Sky last night. If Liverpool don't sign that centre half, forget about it. Because what happened last night, 2 of their starting midfield played in the centre of defence. And you were left with Thiago and Oxlade-Chamberlain playing in midfield, who between them had only started 1 game all season. And good players, but just not up to it just yet because they haven't had minutes yet.
What else is happening?
Okay, well, obviously, look, we have to give Southampton huge praise because Danny Ings scored the goal. It's Southampton up to 6th place. Obviously, we mentioned Liverpool are still level on points with Manchester United. United play Burnley next week. Avoid defeat, they'll be ahead of Liverpool going into that game at Anfield. But Southampton, you could see after the full-time whistle what it meant to Ralph Hasenhüttl. Sunk to his knees at full-time. First time that he's beaten Jurgen Klopp. Obviously, the 2 men know each other very well from the time in Germany, but also they did their pro license together as well. The action continues tonight. Tottenham against Brentford in the first of the League Cup semi-finals. Jose Mourinho, ahead of the game, has described this as his biggest match since taking over as Tottenham boss. That game at 7:45. I mentioned the FA Cup. Something to look out for this weekend. Clubs in the 3rd round are set to forfeit matches with positive COVID-19 testing. They can't fulfil their fixtures this weekend. So the FA, according to the Times UK, has sent a letter to clubs warning games must go ahead if both teams have 14 fit registered players available. Replays have obviously been scrapped already because of the tight schedule. All teams in the 3rd round will be tested 72 hours before their matches. The return date for inter-county training is set to be pushed back a couple of weeks due to the surge in COVID-19 cases here. County players are due to resume collective training on the 15th of January, but the GAA are still hopeful the National Leagues will start back at the end of February and the weekend of the 27th and 28th. And finally for me, the organisers of Cheltenham said they make a final decision on crowds attending this year's festival in the next week or 2. The National Hunt Showpiece is due to get underway 10 weeks from today.
I do love a good sports organisation. We'll make a decision on crowds when actually everybody knows the decision has been made months ago and for them and by the health authorities. Phil, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. OTBAM live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Let me tell you what's coming up on the show between now and 10 o'clock this morning. We're going to have David Meyler in just a moment. We'll run you through the sports pages and the top stories from the day. We're going to talk about the NFL wildcard weekend with Mike Carlson around about 8:30 this morning at 10 to 9, talking Cork GAA with Michael Moynihan of the Irish Examiner after their big deal with Mike Ashley. Then it's a special deal or no deal with Nathan Murphy. And we'll play you out with some Ron O'Gara goodness around about 9:30, talking about Jack Carty, who was on the show yesterday, and what Carty needs to do to make the Ireland setup for the forthcoming Six Nations. It is 10 to 8 this morning here on OTB AM, and I'm delighted to say David Meyler is with us. Good morning to you, David. How are you?
Good morning.
What happened in Liverpool last night?
Wow. Where do we start? Lack of intensity. The work rate wasn't there. I think I wouldn't usually say this, but I think Jurgen Klopp got it wrong last night with the midfield he selected. Obviously, playing Jordan Henderson at centre back. I think he was massively missed. I think it was just, look, Southampton are in good form. Do you know what I mean? Ever since, their 9-0 loss against Leicester, they've been, on this kind of upward. I don't even know what the word is, but they've just been so positive. And, I just think Liverpool played right into their hands last night, and they didn't start well. And then once Southampton got the goal, Liverpool in the first half just looked like nothing they could do could go right. Like, I think, to sum it up, the stat of Trent Alexander-Arnold giving away the ball 38 times in the game, which is unheard of. That, I was flabbergasted when I heard, and I think that just summed up Liverpool's performance, waiting till the 70-odd minute to get their first shot on target. It was a really bad performance, but look, Jurgen's a well-experienced manager. He's a top-class, manager. There's no doubt that he'll get the troops going again, because they have to pick themselves up, because the last 3 results haven't been good enough.
How big an impact? Sorry, Jared. That's impact you talk about there of Jordan Henderson playing at centre back. So, say that in alternate reality, they actually start Williams or Phillips at centre back last night. How much of an added impetus does he give rather than a semi-fit Thiago or Oxlade-Chamberlain last night in terms of chances created, David? Do we underrate him sometimes in terms of the possession and the good possession that they have in the opposition third?
It's not just the possession I would look at. Certainly, Thiago is probably better in his passing than Henderson is. I think the big thing that was missed in the middle was probably his leadership, his organisation. The level of intensity he brings to his pressing, his closing down, and then the big thing that has always been noted is the fact that when Trent Alexander-Arnold wants to get forward, Henderson is the first to kind of tuck around on that side. And if you actually watch the game back last night, there was times when the ball was played into Thiago and he's popping it out to the fullbacks, first time. But they were receiving the ball probably 10, 15 yards short of where they were usually, where they're, higher up the pitch over the halfway line, so they can inevitably pin, Southampton back. We did seem to see a lot of it more in the second half. But of course, that's always going to happen after the first half performance. There was going to be a reaction. You can imagine Jurgen Klopp is going to have a few things to say. But I just felt that it is tricky because, Thiago's been out for a while. Oxlade-Chamberlain's not played a lot of football. There's no excuse for Gini. Look, he was still busy around. But at the same time, I can't remember off the top of my head the last time, a team that Liverpool played, the midfield had more intensity than they outworked them. And that wasn't just, I suppose, midfield. I suppose the whole Southampton team, which that would be the concern for me. I know there was almost a sense of frustration in Liverpool's performance last night. A few players didn't look themselves. There was an instance with Mane even in the second half. I think he was probably more annoyed at Andre Marner for not giving him, fouls or penalties. But there was a hint of frustration in that performance. And look, it is a concern. You go 3 games for the reigning champions and you pick up 2 points. They would have looked at those games, of course, playing West Brom, then Newcastle. You'd expect to beat the 2 of them. And then, obviously to come unstuck. And you think about they've scored 1 goal in 3 games, which is unheard of for the front 3 they have. Of course, look, we've highlighted, I have certainly, that Firmino needs to score more goals, but Salah and Mane, we've never questioned them over their goal scoring. Of course, I know Sadio went through that 9 game without scoring, but his performances were still at such a top level that, last night was, albeit I'm here talking as a Liverpool fan, you would be concerned because obviously, they've got the FA Cup and then they've got Manchester United, which is, which is going to be the big one. Obviously, now United win their game in hand, they go 3 points clear. So it is a concern, but at the same time, they can bounce back.
Do you play the kids against Villa at the weekend, or the kids plus Thiago and Oxlade-Chamberlain to give them game time, but you rest absolutely everybody else to make sure that they're as fit and fresh as they can be for the Man United game?
Do you know what? As I was sitting waiting to join the call, I was thinking about it myself. I don't know what he'll do. I would probably lean with the fact that if you looked at his post-match interview, he did say, like, the last time we played Villa or whatever, we took a good thumping. We don't want that to happen again. So I can see him freshening up a few places, but I still feel that he's going to play 5, 6, 7 of the boys to kind of like make sure that they still have the level of senior players on the pitch. You could probably see an altered midfield. You certainly expect some of the you might rest Fabinho or something and give 2 of the young lads a game. I can still see him playing 6 or 7. I wouldn't be surprised if the front 3 all played. So it'll be interesting to see what team he does select.
Is that the right thing to do when the Man United game now suddenly takes on this extra meaning?
Look, when I never wanted to be rested when I played. Sometimes it wasn't good enough to stay in the team, but at the same time, I think these players will want to, they'll be waking up this morning knowing that, the performance wasn't good enough last night. They'll be looking at the next game. And certainly, if I was in that team, I'd be putting my hand up wanting to play. Whoever it was, I wouldn't want to be rested. I wanted to go out and I'd want to put in a performance. Obviously the manager, they've done exceptional things over the last few seasons, but I'm not saying they are in a bad period if you look at the last 3 results, but they need to find that result to kind of, turn it around. And with that, you could kind of see them going with a, full strength squad kind of to get that confidence back into the players, going into the Manchester United game.
And there's a full week between them anyway, so it's not like there's actually more than a week between them. So it's not like this game is on Friday. It's the following Sunday week after that. So it's not like that one game is going to be, unless you get an injury, obviously, exhausting them further. The other thing that is being talked about by the Liverpool fans is the general level of exhaustion that the team have at the moment. Mid-season, can you fix that, or is that accurate, do you think?
Look, it's certainly something. Look, there's been a lot of fixtures, but it's no, certainly Liverpool do play with this high intensity, and you could see that last night from the performance. It was off. But then if you kind of look back to the Newcastle game, West Brom game, I wouldn't have said they were so straining on the legs, in the sense that like both teams were pinned right back in. Might have had the odd counter-attack here and there. It's not as if they're, playing end-to-end football, which I imagine the Manchester United game will be, certainly with the level of quality that they have and that, that they'll bring to the table. I wouldn't be looking too much into that. I think these players are fit. Of course, there'll be probably more mental exhaustion from, not winning games, drawing games, and then obviously losing last night. That will probably be more frustrating and make it feel like it was more of a slog. But certainly these players are well capable of going, we've seen it with Liverpool. Obviously, the year they finished second to City and they won the Champions League. You're playing every, Wednesday, Tuesday, Saturday, whatever it is. So they're well able to do it. So, as you said there, they play next weekend and then the following weeks, so the 7 days in between. So that could be, could be a blessing for them that they, if they get the full rest, and he can give them time to spend with their families.
What are you thinking if you're Nat Phillips or Reece Williams and you see 2 midfielders playing at centre back?
Am I doing enough? Of course, look, if you look at Phillips's performance against Newcastle, he's a big, tall centre half. He's good in the air. I think he dealt with the aerial ball as well. But Liverpool are going to dominate possession. They've done that in many games. I think his distribution was quite poor in the game. And then, of course, we don't see him, say, Monday to Friday during training, what he's doing. So I think I'd be looking first and foremost at myself. I wouldn't be looking at anything. And of course, then when you've got someone like Henderson slotting back in, an experienced, yes, midfielder, but he's played for his country 50 times. He's been captain of the club for 6-7 seasons. So I wouldn't be too downhearted. I'd be more kind of, I need to get back out in training. They'll be training this morning. I need to be working hard, showing the manager that I deserve a place while the other centre-halves are injured. So that'll be the first thing I'll be doing. And then, of course, as we won't know after me saying they've got the FA Cup game, so whether or not Jurgen Klopp will rotate, you want to be putting your hand up. So I'll be looking at my own performances and training over the next couple of days.
Are you going to be one rung down the pecking order again in the space of the next month? Are Liverpool going to sign a centre-back?
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? As much as, the videos of Virgil on social media look great, he does look like he's moving, but look, I've been there with those kind of injuries. It is tough, whether or not he'll be back this season is one question. Joe Gomez, I don't know how he's progressing, and then of course Joel Matip. It does raise concerns that maybe we do need another centre half, but then it's a kind of a question. I remember speaking to my dad last week and he was saying go out and sign Koulibaly, but then I said, like, you're going to have all these centre halves that want to be playing. I think if Jurgen is going to sign the centre half, I think he'll probably try and sign a 21, 22-year-old who has experience of playing in the Premier League or in a top league in Europe, who will be probably one for the future. If he does sign one, that he can kind of dip him in, dip him out, and keep it fresh. Because if you sign someone, I've seen David Alaba linked as well, and obviously I mentioned Koulibaly, but those people will want to play regularly. And then, of course, we know Virgil is the first one in the back four. So then it's like, what about Joe Gomez? I know he's out, but could create problems down the road. So it'll be interesting to see what he does, but I definitely do think they do need to, sign a centre-half.
There must be another Wesley Fofana out there that they have scouting information on, who's like 19, 20, 21, who's going to be very good, who could play 5 or 6 games now, and then you can stick back in on the bench for half a season, but play 15, 20 times next year and 15, 20 times the year after, and then eventually he's your partner to Van Dijk, or if Van Dijk moves on, he's your replacement for him. Like surely the scouting system is articulate enough to know somebody at the right kind of level who can play now at a pinch, but who isn't a long-term, immediately going to put pressure on. Or maybe you have great subs then in Matip and Gomez in the future, and this guy is your future, but that's like a bonus if you get there. No,
definitely. There's no doubt in that. Not just Liverpool, but Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City, all the big clubs will all have massive scouting systems. They'll be, dipping all into every market, from South America, Asia, all across Europe. They'll be looking at players from all across the world. There's no doubt about that. So I wouldn't be too stressed about that. I think the big concern though is, I suppose, Matip is the one who regularly picks up injuries. The other two, of course, have had bad knee injuries. So I kind of feel in my stomach that I think come the summer, I think Matip will probably move on. And then I think, like I've said, I think they'll try and sign a young centre-half, like you said, that can come in, play, half a dozen games, could be in and out, and kind of they're looking at one for the future that they can almost groom him into the centre-half they want. Probably the example I would use would be someone like a Ben White, who's at Brighton, someone like him who's very comfortable on the ball, and then, you're going to get him in, he can play. And then obviously, look, I know the lad had a great season last year with Leeds. He's playing all the time now with Brighton. But he'd be certainly one that you'd be looking at. We could sign this lad and have him for the next, 10, 11 years, because he's still, really young. So that could be a potential one, but there's no doubting that Liverpool will be looking all across Europe, really.
A few years ago, Jurgen Klopp seemed to have his first real obstacle as Liverpool manager, where he got them to a certain point and they could almost beat the better teams easier than they could beat the lower division or the lower down the division teams, because they would set up with their mass defence and they wouldn't have as many counter-attacking opportunities. Do you think he's kind of facing a similar issue now, that when he comes up against these mass defences, he is back to that level of really struggling to break them down?
Well, it is a problem because they're not scoring goals. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. The more I think about it, from the final whistle last night till this morning, you're scratching your head. It's unlike Salah, Mane, and certainly Firmino to be providing them two chances. There was just a lack of clear-cut chances. And if you look back over the last few games, of course, Carl Darlow made 2 great saves against Salah. But last night it was just there was just no kind of clear-cut chances. Even the one that Manny kind of gets through, he scuffs the shot. I think he kicks the floor. But that's look. There's no Jurgen Klopp has been around a long time. Obviously, he's won back-to-back titles at Dortmund, so he knows what it takes. I think he just needs to almost recharge the batteries and kind of keep the boys fresh and make them that bit hungrier again. That was the disappointing thing for last night. It really was. It was just that lack of intensity from them that we're used to seeing. I don't know, is it tiredness, fatigue, whatever from the games, but that's not really an excuse because everybody else is playing the same amount of the games. But look, Jurgen has to find a way to get them going again. And that, we all know that Manchester United coming up, and obviously things are going better in Manchester than they are in Liverpool in the last few weeks. So it's certainly going to make for a good game, which is going to be very interesting for not only those sets of fans, but the neutrals.
Well, are you legitimately worried, David, that this could actually go the way of Manchester United this season? Is there a real sustained title challenge going to come from Old Trafford?
I think they'll be thereabouts, but I don't think they'll win the league. The one for me, it would be Manchester City. Obviously, their performance the other day was very good, and I do feel that they've been miles off it for Man City. But can they follow it up with 2 or 3 performances? I do think they can. I think City are the team now that will actually go on and win probably 5, 6, 7 in a row. Look, Aguero's coming back, which has been the big thing for them to getting goals. I do think United will be up there, but I still think it will be Liverpool, City 1 and 2. I think a lot of people won't like that, but I just can't see Manchester United. Everything is going for them at the moment. Look, if they go and beat Liverpool with a top class performance, then I'll come on here and I'll apologise and say, do you know what, they're genuine title contenders. But I don't know, is it the Liverpool fan in me that just doesn't want to admit it? But I can't see them winning the title, no.
Well, let's isolate that down into Manchester United against Liverpool in a few weeks' time. How worried are you about that particular fixture?
I wouldn't say I'm worried. If you're a Manchester United player, it's a game that you're excited for, you're looking forward to. You want to be playing in those types of games. Certainly Liverpool haven't been on the run, but it was quite interesting. Something slightly different, but obviously Jordan came out yesterday after the game and he did his post-match interview, and he mentioned, usually with him it's always the next game is the most important game. And he said, well, we've got Aston Villa in the FA Cup and then we've got Manchester United, which I can't remember for the love of me him mentioning 2 games as the next 2 games. So it obviously is in their mind. So you can tell that there was probably said something like, you don't know if something was said, but there might have been something said like as in, we can't play like this against Manchester United. We need to be better. So I fully expect Liverpool to, whether or not they chop and change for the FA Cup, but I expect them to turn up, when they play Manchester United, and I expect Liverpool to beat them. Right.
Well, look, we've got plenty of time to preview that. I'm looking forward to it. It is a proper rivalry now because yesterday all the Man United fans were taking it in the neck from the Liverpool fans for we're joint top. You don't get a special prize for being joint top. Today, the Liverpool fans are a little less quiet than they were yesterday.
No, definitely.
Yeah, well, look, that's what football's about. David, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers, guys.
David Meyler with really interesting stuff there. 0879 180 180 is the number. The Liverpool fans aren't buying Man United as title contenders.
And why should they? This is what we need to appreciate about this, is that we're going to have these 2 kind of esteemed clubs going into this heavyweight title race, hopefully, over the next couple of months, and going lower and lower and lower than the other. And there's going to be so many sick insults put out there by both managers, by both players. It's going to be very tetchy. It's going to be very petulant. This is what we want. We want to see them get as immature as possible. And then for Manchester City to just dart around them and win the league by 15 points.
And your point earlier was that Klopp brought this up because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is in his head.
I think so. It has to be.
Phil's rebuttal was, he's playing chess, you're playing checkers, and what he's doing is getting in the heads of the VAR official who's like, I can't give a penalty against Jurgen Klopp. Look what he said. I can't do it.
It's not a bad shout from Phil, not going to lie. We have to look at the fact as well that 1 point behind Liverpool as well is Leicester City. And as mentioned earlier on, they're well on top of this season's Premier League penalty table. So maybe if he starts talking about Leicester City and the penalties they get, we'll know that they're a proper title contender as well.
Yeah, well, look, that would be very much a throwback. It's 10 minutes past 8 this morning. If you're a Liverpool fan, you're crying into your cornflakes, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180. And if you're a Manchester United fan, team who are currently joint top of the Premier League, well, get involved. Let's be having you. It's, what are we exactly? 11 minutes past 8 now. Nathan's going to join us after 9 o'clock. We'll talk about the retirement in the Mayo camp, and we'll also do deal or no deal. We'll paint the playoff picture in the NFL with Mike Carlson a little later on this hour, and we're going to dissect the Cork GAA-Sports direct deal. We're back after these.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The OTB Brief. Everything you need to know about sport every morning. Need to get on top of the day's sports news? Well, the OTB Brief is the only sports update you'll need every morning. With all the breaking stories, post-match reaction.
It is a loss, there's no question. We're going to have to adapt as best we can.
And the best bits from off the ball, all in a 10-minute podcast.
I tried to view the lockdown as I tried to see a silver lining and say this is my opportunity to work on my weaknesses.
The OTB Brief. Weekday mornings from 7:20 AM on OTB Sports Radio. Listen on the OTB Sports app.
Bet smart this season with stat betting on the Boyle Sports app. For the first time ever, bet on shots, shots on target, tackles, passes, assists and more, all powered by Opta. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest game of the week right now on the Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
At 12 minutes past 8, let's run you through the sports pages. We'll start with otbsports.com. Chelsea have to take a long-term view on Lampard. That's Pat Nevin, voice of reason on the show last night, agreeing with me. That's why he's the voice of reason. Liverpool Premier League title defence dented by Ings at Southampton. Rog identifies the one area Jack Carty can improve to nail down his Ireland place. It's a great picture of Jack Carty streaking away from the Leinster defence in the game at the weekend. And Cheltenham organisers resigned to punter free festival. That is exactly what's going to happen. And Graham Riley calls time on inter-county career with Meath. There is some Meath gossip on Twitter. Bernard Flynn might be about to take over the reins as manager of the under-20 team. This isn't confirmed just yet, but himself and Graham Garrity might be involved. And I think Peter Lee, the manager of the Mayo women's football team as well. So that's your breaking Meath GAA football gossip, as yet unconfirmed, but those are the reports coming out this morning. Let's run you through the back pages of some of the papers. We'll get to that Mike Ashley column in the Examiner, but the Examiner leading with Uruguayan Players Union blasts racist FA. That is the Uruguayan Players Union who've called for the ban on Cavani to be dropped and for an apology to be issued. Cheltenham Confident Festival will feature horses from Ireland, which is obviously far more important than fans at this stage. And Bennett to return to Dacia setup. Shane Bennett is set to return to the Waterford senior hurling setup. He stepped away from the panel in late 2019, but he is only still 24, and he's going to join up with his brothers Kieran and Stephen for the upcoming season. And then obviously that's the Ings returns to haunt Klopp. The rest of them are Danny Ings celebrating his goal. Danny Stings, tab of the morning to you from the Mirror. Prem gets green light to carry on. That was in the middle of the game last night. Boris Johnson was locking down Britain after their latest bout of mishandling things. The show must go on. New COVID lockdown, record number of Prem players test positive, but the show must go on. That's it. Blunder and lightnings. Blunder and lightnings. Klopp shocked after 111 seconds. Is that good? The other big story, which we've got to get into call on the show, Neil gets backing. So Dermot Desmond has given his backing to Neil Lennon. I don't see any quotes on the back page, but it looks like, and that's certainly our information, is that there's not going to be any change at Celtic this season, or at least until the end of the season. Ings getting tasty. That's the Stars back page. They also have a picture of Andy Moran and David Clarke from 2017. The news coming through that David Clarke is retiring after 20 seasons of playing at the very top level. And Knight on the tune. Newcastle have joined a growing band of Premier League clubs interested in snapping up Jason Knight. One more season, I think, in the Championship for him, and then off you go to the Premier League where you're going to get loads of game time, or maybe you go straight in, and that's the stratospheric rise that he's on. The Irish Daily Mail for you this morning. Ings stings. No, not for me. And Canellan's campaign to curb Dublin funding. Former Westmeath footballer John Canellan launched a campaign yesterday to rein in Croke Park's funding of Dublin GAA. He's got an open letter that he's written to every club secretary in the country except for the clubs from Dublin, saying that he wants them to take a motion to Congress in 2022. So this is far-sighted, and as strategic as these things go, this is as intelligent a way of going about getting change in the GAA as you've ever seen. Because normally this will be like, oh, let's get it in for the immediate Congress. What he's doing is he's asking everybody for the following year's Congress, not 2021, which is next month. It's the year after that. So we'll talk about the rights and wrongs of that over the next while as well. The Times, Ings blows title race wide open. Tour hit as Ali tests positive. England's preparations for the first test in Sri Lanka suffered a setback when all-rounder Moynihan tested positive for COVID-19 within a day of arriving in the country, and Brentford hired racist hooligan. Never a good look for a football club to hire a racist hooligan. So he was hired by the club last summer despite a previous conviction for football-related violence. So Brentford obviously not doing enough when it comes to looking up their due diligence. The Guardian, that's Marcus Rashford getting the Guardian's 2020 Footballer of the Year, and they've got an exclusive interview with him. I mean, really, what Marcus Rashford has done is put to shame every single other high-profile sports person who's like, oh, you know, I'm not going to get involved in politics. I don't have time to learn or think about these things. And Marcus Rashford has just been himself and been absolutely sensational as a person, and now is backing it up with his football as well. Inter-county action facing a minimum delay of 2 weeks. That's the same story that they have on the back of the Herald, and of course the Irish Independent this morning. Return of inter-county training to be delayed. Recent COVID spike set to stall resumption of new GAA season by at least 2 weeks. This is going to have a knock-on impact, and the possibility will be that we don't have a Club All-Ireland final until 2022. So that'll be a long old campaign for clubs, but obviously it's the right thing to do. And Larmour back as Leinster call on big guns after shock loss. It'll be great to see Jordan Larmour back. We could certainly do with him from an Ireland perspective. The Racing Post, racing in Britain to continue in strict new lockdowns, and Cheveley Park stud owner David Thompson dies at 84, and they're looking at the Spurs versus Brentford game tonight. And then the Irish Times, basically the match report. Liverpool falter again as Ings strikes early against former club, and Lampard to get time to arrest Chelsea slump is the other story there. Of course, we didn't get a chance to talk to David Meyler about Jack Byrne, but he has officially signed for Mick McCarthy's Applewell in Cyprus, and the contract runs until 2023. So 2-year deal for him, and fair play to him. What do you want to start about?
Well, before we get on to Mayo and John Canella, let's just finish up on Liverpool this morning, because we can bring you the full clip of Jurgen Klopp talking about referees, talking about penalties after their 1-0 defeat to Southampton last night.
So I turned around in the situation. We had a really good view on it. And it looked like a clear penalty in that situation. I turned around to the fourth official and he said, will we check it? He said, we checked it already, no penalty. That's the 100% truth. And now somebody wants to tell me how quick they had it in all these different angles, but that's 100%. We checked it already, no penalty. Look, and then you have situations, the boys really want. You have situations, and there were moments in when that last year, I think a penalty, or 2 years ago, I don't know, against Leicester, and people there, Sadio Mane going down that easy. If this boy would go down easy, we would have had this time a penalty, and last game a stone wall penalty. But what Andrew Mariner did with Sadio Mane tonight, I'm not sure if that's still okay, to be honest. So, like, the boy tried absolutely everything. Were a few great challenges with Walker Post, but there were a lot of situations which should have been free kicks as well. And the last situation when he goes down, you see that back in the box. He hits him in the end with his left foot, and that's another penalty. So we cannot change it. I heard now that Man United had more penalties in 2 years since Roda is there than I had in 5.5 years. I have no idea if it's my fault or I don't know how that can happen. But that's no excuse for the performance of tonight, because that's something we can change. The rest we cannot change. We just have to respect the decision. But our performance we can change, and that's where we will put all the effort in now.
Yeah.
Well, you can change it a little bit if you do manage to get into the head of the referee for the next game, and that might or might not be the reason why Jurgen Klopp brought it up last night. No idea if that statistic is true. I wonder, is the press officer of Liverpool coming along and saying, here's the tweet, is Jurgen Klopp actually, does he have a burner account on Twitter somewhere where he's actually looking this stuff up? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting, and it's going to be probably the most important piece of narrative going into that Liverpool versus Manchester United game. And if there's a penalty awarded, as Phil said earlier on, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on whether or not that was the right decision or not. A couple of other stories this morning. You mentioned the Mayo retirements continuing, a lot of GAA retirements over the last few days. David Clarke, the last one to go. 2002, comes in 2001 actually, and it's like 18 seasons put down in the Mayo jersey. Just an incredibly long time. The longevity required is ridiculous, and in the modern game as well, it's all the more impressive. Like, this Mayo team is slowly changing almost by the day at the moment, and the makeup of this great team we've had over the last 10 years is slowly changing and morphing into a new one. And there has always been a debate around the Mayo goalkeeper. David Clarke has hung on to that jersey quite a bit over the last few years. An unbelievable shot stopper, a brilliant goalkeeper, and maybe almost a little bit unfortunate that he came in in the era of the time when goalkeepers had to restart games and had to be brilliant off the tee. And if he perhaps existed 20 years earlier, he would go down as an all-time great between the sticks. He will in a Mayo context. And I think in the immediate sense of things, he's going to be badly missed for Mayo.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been a really interesting career. It has, in his career, everything that Mayo football has. It has absolute heights and the devastation of mistakes, and also then of being dropped, and you would have to say in some cases erroneously. Like the debate about his greatness and where you place him in that pantheon is kind of, it's a bit of a microcosm of where you place this Mayo team in the debate about great teams. You either dismiss the fact that they're a great team because they haven't won All-Ireland, or you look beyond the scoreboard and see that they drove Dublin to reach the great heights that they reached. Like, I think it's a fair point that maybe what we need to do is append him to the Cluxton conversation and go, in the time of Cluxton, in the era of Cluxton, he managed to win an All-Star, which, when you think about it in those terms, is like, well, that's pretty impressive. You stopped the greatest goalkeeper and potentially the greatest, most important, most impactful footballer of all time from being an All-Star one year. That's pretty good.
A couple of years, like he's won 2 All-Stars, and like that'll go down as an unbelievable achievement for any goalkeeper to actually stand out to the point where you win the All-Star on 2 occasions. There's no messing positions around when it comes to the goalkeeping All-Star. If you're a good midfielder and you happen to be one of 3, you'll probably get to be an All-Star at some stage and get moved around, but not for the goalkeeper.
Maybe they should have done that. Cluxton left corner back every year. Just nailed on.
Probably would have been a better All-Star team than anybody else at cornerback. I see that Bernard Brogan was tweeting yesterday, still haunting me, the miss that he had in 2012. And that save from David Clarke on that occasion. You've got the double penalty save. You've got a collection of really memorable moments from a goalkeeper, which is very, very rare, especially in the shot-stopping stakes nowadays, that when it comes to the modern goalkeeper, obviously Cluxton is this ever-present, but you're thinking of the likes of your Sean Patton and someone like Niall Morgan, for example, who just are so good off the tee as well as being great shot-stoppers, whereas David Clarke really made his name and continued to make his name as a great goalkeeper. And yeah, like, it's, I guess in the way that if Cluxton ever retires, maybe that'll never happen. They have seem to have a ready understudy in Comerford. I'm not sure if Mayo have been cultivating a similar thing just yet, which may be a testament to how much David Clarke could actually nail down that position in the last couple of years.
Is Rob Henley still playing, isn't he?
He will be, yeah. I presume he'll be back in the fold next season. But
he's only 30.
Seems that the conversation around Clarke versus Henley wasn't really a thing this season, and like Clarke is, even when you think about his performance in the All-Ireland final, you kind of think, well, what will happen to Clarke's kick-out? And it didn't necessarily lead to any disasters this year. And in fact, it actually went quite well for a lot of the first half of that game. So maybe he actually doesn't get enough credit in that department, where there was kicking the ball over the sideline in, I can't remember the All-Ireland final that it was, maybe it was 16, and how that kind of stuck with him, and everybody's like, well, this guy's no good at kickouts. Maybe actually, if you look at his performance in this year's All-Ireland final, he had actually worked on that part of his game, and it didn't actually occur to the rest of us that this is what's after happening, that this guy went away and worked on his kickouts and got quite good at them.
It's a golden age for goalkeeping. I think we can all agree that. From the arrival of Cluxton on the scene and from the setback that Cluxton suffered being sent off in an All-Ireland semi-final to the point where he, as I've said, is like one of the most impactful footballers in the history of the game. At the same time, a bunch of other goalkeepers have been driving standards on as well. You know, we haven't mentioned Rory Beggan in this conversation as well. For the first time, that position has become a really important position in the sport, and in the midst of all that, this guy puts in an incredible career and wins a couple of All-Stars. So we wish him all the best in his retirement and look forward to talking to him sooner rather than later. This proposal that the Westmeath footballer John Connellan put out a tweet, was it a month and a half ago at this stage, talking about the imbalance in funding that the Dubs receive. It got great traction, generated a national debate, and he has taken it one step further and he's written to every club secretary in the country, apart from the Dublin clubs, to say that he wants them to take a motion forward to Congress in 2022. This is, as I said a little bit earlier on, as far-sighted a way of dealing with the GAA bureaucracy that I've seen in a long time. Normally, a lot of people kind of come with a proposal, they try and get it done, they try with a short, sharp bursts, blitzkrieg approach. This is the long war that John Connellan is settling in for.
And it'll probably force a conversation from a Dublin perspective on why he is wrong, because it feels that conversation hasn't been properly put out there from a Dublin perspective just yet, that we should be getting the development funding. Now, I assume that is the stance of Dublin, that they will feel that John Connellan is wrong here. And I think that actually having a motion that could go to Congress would probably force them out a little bit and encourage a little more debate around it. The motion, as you say, is going to go to the 2022 Congress if it gets there. And basically the motion for approval is that all coaching and development funding must be allocated to individual counties on an equal basis based on registered GAA members in the preceding year in each county, up to a maximum variance of 5%. So this would cut down Dublin's development funding quite a bit. His general point is that Dublin have so much money coming in from sponsorship streams at the moment that they don't actually need the development funding to fund what they're doing in schools or when it comes to promotion of the games. That AIG essentially, or other sponsors, that money can drip feed down into development funding areas and can actually replace that, and that funding can therefore go towards counties that actually need it more. The two things that need to be addressed here is, firstly, does that actually happen? Do the revenues that come from the Dublin inter-county team being so successful, are those revenues allowed to go down to grassroots? Will that drip feed be allowed to happen without this development funding? Will the GPOs still be employed? Will Dublin GAA still be able to promote the game in the capital without this money? That's the first question that needs to be asked. And then the second thing that needs to be asked is, how will this money be well spent in the other counties? Who will be in charge of looking after the increased funding that these counties will get? Will the idea of a CEO in a number of counties be implemented? I know it already exists in a lot of counties, but will there be perhaps more full-time employees, details to actually look after the spending of this money to ensure that other counties can have similar success stories to how big money was spent in Dublin in the right areas? So they're the two things for me that probably need to be debated over the next little while, because I'm sure that there are plenty of people in Dublin who say this would be a disaster and plenty of people outside of Dublin who say this will be great. I think actually trying to find enough people to vote for this motion, though, that's a realistic possibility. I think that if you're looking at this and county boards are essentially going to be given more money to develop the game in their own counties, then you'd imagine they're all going to vote for this. And that should get you over the 66% or whatever is required in GAA Congress. So an interesting few months ahead on that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, an interesting year ahead, essentially. But I guess, at this point, I haven't had a chance to peruse the proposal in detail. But is it suggesting a cut to Dublin, or is it suggesting bringing the other counties up to Dublin's level? Because they're two different things. Or is it as explicit as that, saying that, like, if you fund at this level, you've got to fund everybody else at the same level? And because the funding of the games development officers is working in helping participation in GAA. It is helping make GAA a sport that kids want to do, and that's a dynamic, brilliant thing. And if you're suggesting that we should stop that, then that doesn't make any sense. So you just need to be very careful about what you're actually waging war on here. If you're waging war on the fact that the competition, the senior inter-county competition, doesn't make any sense anymore, and the funding is one aspect of that, then let's have that conversation. But let's also fix the competition and see what happens if the competition is a reasonable, tiered, league-based competition. And let's see what the Dubs are like outside. And if they're still hammering everybody for the next 5 or 6 years, well then there's an inevitability about what comes after that. But only looking at the funding, I think, is a very blunt way of approaching this entire conversation, which is quite nuanced.
Of course it is. At the same time, when it comes to Congress, it's a fairly blunt instrument approach that you need. You need to come to the table with a very specific thing, and you need to get that over the line. And I'm sure John Connellan will be the first person to say that there are a multitude of different issues going on. This has been the specific aspect of the conversation that he has gained notoriety for, because he put up a tweet and it went viral. And fair play to him for actually taking this to the next level now, bringing this to Congress. Maybe he'll come up with another motion afterwards, and he feels that bit by bit he can change GAA society. And I'm sure that's kind of what he's thinking, that it will require multiple things rather than just games development funding to actually change how things are operated. But I agree in your point about what this actually involves for the importance of the actual development of the game in Dublin, because I think we talk about what happened in that plan in 2002, the strategic review for the GAA, where their intention was to ensure that Gaelic games were promoted well across the capital. They've done that spectacularly well. That's happened. But Dublin people would probably say that there's actually more to be done there, which is terrifying for the rest of the country, obviously, on a competitive sense. But you're also conflicted with the idea of, well, shouldn't every kid be given the opportunity to play Gaelic games, or shouldn't it be spread out as much as possible around the capital? So I'm kind of torn on this myself, because I'm sure the money is being well spent in the capital, but we can all see that there is just this massive gap between them and the advantages that they have in the rest of the country. So it's a hard one to call.
Yeah, or it's get the information, have the conversation, be open and transparent about where the advantages are, how you've managed things, share that knowledge as much as you possibly can, and then make sure that the other counties are implementing plans in a way that is financially frugal, but also being managed properly. And again, corporate governance and transparency come into this as well. So let's move on, because we've got to come back to this a little bit later on. 32 minutes past 8 this morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Loads of comments coming in about Liverpool and Manchester United. Liverpool were shambolic. Panic stations for Liverpool. They've lost 4 league games in 3 years. No reason for Pool fans to worry too much. We're just not used to losing games. How bad, says Paul McGee. And then wait till I tell you who has Sadio Mane as his profile pick. You sure have a title race. 10 possible winners and a bunch of blind referees. Who knows what could happen? Keep them coming in. 0879 180 180 is the number. We're going to go back to the Cork GAA story and what the Mike Ashley Sports Direct deal means for the soul of Cork GAA, and what it also means from their financial clout in terms of them being able to tackle the Dubs. But I want to turn to NFL, because it is wildcard weekend this weekend, which is a slightly expanded version of your normal wildcard weekend. There's no Premier League. The FA Cup is on. We thought you're probably going to end up watching a lot of NFL this weekend. We may as well set the table for you, and I'm delighted to say Mike Carlson is here with us this morning. Mike, good morning to you.
Good morning, Owen. And, it's interesting, isn't it? 10 contenders and a blind referee. Sounds just like the NFL last weekend.
A couple of years ago, Owen did a sketch for us here, Mike, about why we should all become Buffalo Bills fans. It was a joke at the time. This time, if you're getting on any bandwagon, the time now to join the Buffalo Bills bandwagon is this weekend. It ain't a joke anymore.
No, not at all. And if recency bias is your big thing, the win over Miami was absolutely dominating in a game that Miami basically was winning in to go in the playoffs. So people were thinking it might be a tough one. They didn't rest their quarterback. They went out and played to win. At home, they're very difficult. Conditions suit them really well. And I think it's a great story, because they've built that team really consistently upward for about 3 years now with Josh Allen's arrival. And Allen, in the second half of this season, became a definite MVP candidate and played it at a remarkably high level for a guy who everybody thought had severe accuracy problems. And one of the old adages of the NFL is that you can't teach a quarterback to be more accurate. But that appears to be exactly what's happened with Josh Allen.
Who takes the credit for that then?
I think it's probably a combination of offensive coordinator and Brian Daboll and maybe Allen himself. And what you can see, you only notice sort of small differences, but the one thing that stands out to me is that because he throws on the run so much and because he has such a strong arm, they've got him at least throwing from balance more, which gives him a little bit. And someone has just taught him to take the juice off the ball. You don't have to John Elway every pass in there at 100 miles an hour.
Was the sense that he always had this in him, Mike, that this season was coming if he did get cultivated in the right way? Or has this really taken everybody by surprise that he's putting in an MVP caliber season?
No, well, the MVP caliber is a bit of a surprise, but I think a lot of us, looked at them as the favorite in that division going into this year, given all the Patriots' troubles and given that Miami, I think, as we saw, are probably still a year away, and certainly in terms of quarterback development. And Allen's a good case for not making quick decisions on quarterbacks. I mean, everybody, when Tua came in for Miami, everybody had Tua madness, and the rest of the season has shown that he's very much a rookie quarterback with a lot to learn, and could conceivably get better as well. But Sean McDermott is a very, very steady coach. It's got that kind of Carolina Panthers from a few years ago feeling. And Josh Allen is their Cam Newton from the year they went to the Super Bowl, only he's performing at a higher level passing wise than Cam Newton did. And otherwise it's the same kind of stifling defense that they play, which means that they don't have to score 50 points as they did against Miami in order to win games.
The problem here, of course.
One more thing. Just the acquisition of Stephon Diggs was huge for them because Diggs gives them a receiver who's a threat at every level of the offense. He can go deep, he goes across the middle, and he's got very, very sure hands, and that makes a quarterback's life easier as well.
The problem, of course, is actually winning this thing without the Bills Mafia being present. So all the fold-up tables in Tampa Bay are thanking their heavens for the life that they are now going to lead, because I had pictures of when Buffalo Bills would eventually win this thing, the Bills Mafia outside, jumping through tables, and the greatest tailgate of all time. So is it really worth winning, Mike? It's my point.
Yeah, I suppose there are reasons why you might want to win otherwise, but yeah, I mean, once you set those people free down in Florida, coming out of the frozen tundra up in Buffalo, you really do have to take defensive measures. But I think it's a wonderful story, and everyone will be talking in the first round of the playoffs about Frank Reich, the Indianapolis coach who quarterbacked the Bills, and when Jim Kelly got hurt, led them to the greatest comeback in NFL playoff history against the Houston Oilers, who are now the Tennessee Titans. So, if the Bills are if they beat Reich and then they go and they beat the Titans in the playoffs, and then they play Tom Brady, say, in the Super Bowl in Tampa, which would be a first for a team to play in their home stadium, it would be too good a script to ever come true.
So they play the Colts on Saturday, and if anybody wants to watch in terms of the excitement level, that's the keep an eye out for this young quarterback and his ability to run and his ability to move, and Stephon Diggs down the field. The other games this weekend, it's the Rams at Seattle, and then it's Tampa at Washington. They're the Saturday games. Sunday is the Ravens at the Titans, the Bears at the Saints, and the Browns at the Steelers. So there's actually loads of great games. I know everybody was kind of complaining about adding extra teams to the wildcard weekend, but what it means is that we've got really good games this weekend, Mike.
Yeah, and I think the Sunday slate is very solid, although the Bears' addition to the playoffs is not necessarily a really positive one. But they're lucky. They're lucky in the sense that they're playing New Orleans, who Drew Brees still doesn't look like the Drew Brees of old or very old or very, very old. And otherwise, though, Baltimore, Tennessee, Cleveland, Pittsburgh on Sunday are both really good-looking matchups. The Browns beat Pittsburgh this past Sunday, but it was Pittsburgh B team basically resting their key players. Tennessee has beaten Baltimore in last year's playoffs and in this season just gone by in Baltimore both times. So they seem to have their number. But what you've got on Sunday are 4 teams who all depend on 3 teams that all depend on the running game. Baltimore gained 440 yards rushing on Sunday. Tennessee have Derrick Henry, who gained 250 all by himself. Cleveland have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in a kind of 1-2 punch. And everybody, marvels about this league being a passing league. And of course, there were more passing touchdowns than any season in league history. There were also more rushing touchdowns because defenses have not been great this year. I think one of the biggest problems with the pandemic is that the lack of preparation, the lack of practice, the lack of contact means that teams aren't tackling as well as they should be tackling, and that's going to be a real problem. So Sunday's a great slate. As usual, the NFL puts the cold weather games in the late slot. So on Saturday, Tampa's at Washington in the evening, and Pittsburgh's at home against Cleveland in the evening, which means the cold weather sets in, which is good news for rushing as well. And the one that really fascinates me is the Tampa-Washington game, because Washington is not a good team, but they have a tremendous front 7 on defense. And what's Tom Brady's biggest vulnerability is to pass rush. So, I think what you're going to see there is probably a lot of all-out rushing of Tom Brady to try to get him to act like a 42-year-old instead of the mere 38-year-old he appears to be when he's playing so far. For the second half, certainly, of this season.
It seems that that's what Washington have tried to do. Chase Young bouncing off the field on Sunday. I'm not sure if you saw that. What was he saying? Tom Brady, I want Tom. Is that a good move to be shouting that about one of the best players of all time the week before a playoff game?
Yeah, somehow I don't think that Tom Brady. I remember there used to be a TV commercial with a young quarterback who was getting his first start, and they have him in the tape room with the film projector going because it was that long ago, and he's watching Lawrence Taylor play defense, and Taylor is destroying the quarterbacks he's facing, and it's a commercial for Tums, which was a stomach settler, and the guy's turning green and then getting the Tums to keep his stomach going. And I think that's kind of the thing they'll be showing Brady, but he's been there and been through that. I don't think it's going to scare him at all. You always tell your players not to give the other team locker room bulletin board kind of stuff, but one of the things that's happened for Tampa in the second half of the year, especially, is that their offensive line is sort of settled down and they protect Tom Brady pretty well. So that's going to be the interesting part of this matchup. Now, Alex Smith is a quarterback for Washington, which is a great story, and he's probably going to win comeback player of the year, but that doesn't mean that he's been a really good quarterback since he came back and played, and their offense isn't a really powerful offense. And Tampa's defense is a little bit underrated. They can make some plays. So, much as it would be a great upset scenario, and as a number of people point out, the last 2 teams that made it into the playoffs with losing records both won their first playoff game at home, because you get in as division champions. So they get their first game at home, and they both won that game. So there is that kind of feeling that if you were looking for a real upset, that would be kind of the one to look at, because I can't see, for example, Baltimore winning at Tennessee being anyone's idea of an upset, really. And then, the Rams, Seattle, who knows? I don't know if John Wolford or if Jared Goff's going to be back at quarterback, but to be honest, Wolford didn't have a high-powered offense going there, but he really did keep things alive. And that's something that Goff sometimes can't do when the pressure gets on. But if the Rams are to win that game, and I really don't think they will, but it'll be their defense, because they're a very, very strong defensive team. And people know Aaron Donald's up there, but they're pretty solid all the way back.
If you were to pick somebody to get hot to win it from here, who would not be who you expect to win it from here at this point, which of the teams or which of the quarterbacks kind of strikes you as somebody who could do an Eli Manning or a Joe Flacco on this, as opposed to what we expect, which is Patrick Mahomes in the final, probably against Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, the kind of problem is none of. Apart from Chicago and Washington, really, maybe Tampa, it'd be funny to cast Tom Brady in that role, wouldn't it? But I'm sure a lot of people are thinking that, that that Brady was not really expected, especially after the first weeks of the season, to turn into playoff Tom Brady with this team. But if he did that, I think it would be a bit of a surprise. The team that could turn around maybe is Seattle, because everything goes on Russell Wilson. And, each year you think, okay, this is the year Seattle's put it together so that, the game doesn't depend on let's keep it close till the fourth quarter, and then Russell Wilson will win it for us by making a couple of huge plays. And otherwise, I think Tennessee is probably, I'm not sure they get past the Ravens. By Friday, I'll probably be picking the Ravens to win that game. But nobody still gives Ryan Tannehill much credit for what he does, and does pretty well. And the emergence of A.J. Brown, Baltimore's got Hollywood Brown. I like to call him Bulldozer Brown after that play he made against the Ravens where he carried two guys into the end zone with him. But his emergence alongside Corey Davis means that they've got receiving threats now that open up their game a bit. Derrick Henry's obviously the focus of the offense, but Tannehill running and passing off play action, they could carry it there, but their defense just isn't that good. And that's always the question. When you get decent quarterbacks making the playoff run, which is what I put Eli Manning in that category, it's usually because they're on a really strong defensive team that plays well, which is exactly what the Giants did in their playoff run in 2007 and beat the Patriots, and then in 2011. And they especially did well against the Patriots by rushing the passer. So, I hesitate to say Alex Smith is going to make a long playoff run in this one. But, it's going to be difficult. And there's no good solution for the problem of wild cards and bye weeks, because two teams getting a bye was interesting. One team getting a bye is sort of less interesting. And by expanding the playoffs, you let weaker teams in. And one point I think that doesn't get made much is everyone's complaining about the NFC and Chicago at 8-8 and Washington winning the horrible Eastern Division and at 7-9. But one of the reasons for that is that the AFC had the two worst teams in football in the Jags and the Jets. And they also had Houston and Cincinnati, who Cincinnati were 4-11-1. The worst team in the NFC was 4-11-1. That was the Eagles. So, it's partly a case that a lot of teams look good because they ate up those weak teams at the bottom of the schedule. And even more so in the NFC, Seattle and the rest of the NFC West all played the played the NFC East and beat up on them. The Rams were 4-0 against the weak NFC East. So that kind of changes things there too. But I think you're absolutely right. It's everybody's waiting for Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes to enter next week.
And is it one of those two who's going to win MVP, Mike?
Oh, I think Rodgers is a lock for the MVP right now, because the voting will get done before any of the playoff games are taken into account. Mahomes has done, in a way, he's kind of been Russell Wilson in that he's done what he's had to do. And Kansas City have won a lot of close games where you won't necessarily think it was in danger, but they haven't played as well as you get Mahomes in some years. So I think Rodgers is number one, and you could actually make a case for Josh Allen being the MVP of the AFC. Although it's kind of a toss-up between him and Mahomes.
Mike Carlson, good stuff. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks a million.
Oh, thanks, Ger.
It's Mike Carlson giving us some thoughts there this Tuesday morning at 8:49. If you want to get in touch with us, a reminder that the number is 087 9180 180. Reminder to OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're going to talk about Cork and their funding in just a moment. But to wrap that up, Owen, you've gone on the NFL bandwagon this year a little bit?
I've always been a Buffalo Bills fan. You know this. I follow every single game. And I am paying particular attention over the last 48 hours. I've hopped on the bandwagon again.
The Buffalo Bills obviously were in 3 successive Super Bowls in the 90s, and there's a missed kick and to win it, and there's a brilliant 30 for 30 about it. where the guy is looking back and still kind of in tears about the missed kick, and they've never won a Super Bowl, and that was a great team, led by an Irish-American QB who has gone on to have this very public battle with cancer as well. And it's like this kind of Mayo-esque story, which, this year there's actually a reasonable chance they're playing so well. If anybody wants a feel-good story this weekend and for the next few weekends to follow, get aboard the Buffalo Bills bandwagon. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and as Mike was saying there, the legitimate improvement in a quarterback is a story that anyone can get behind as well. He was obviously quite high profile coming into the team and has gone to a whole new level this year, Josh Allen. Like the very recent memories. The first time I sat aboard the bandwagon, it was kind of a Tyrod Taylor-led team. You'd Nathan Peterman, I think, played a couple of playoff games, maybe just one playoff game. So times have been tough if you just focus on the quarterback a little bit. But Josh Allen, all of a sudden, is really, really, really good, and that's all you can hope for. Because even in the previous format, I know there's an extra couple of teams this year, but even in the previous format, you tended to get a couple of teams in the playoffs who had average quarterbacks, either due to injuries late on in the season or maybe a defense that was amazing and carried them through. And I don't know how that happens, considering it's the most important position by a mile. But this year, that's not the case for Buffalo Bills. They actually have a really good quarterback and will be better than his opposite number in a lot of the games that he plays. And hopefully it will be a few games that he gets to play. All right, 8:51 this morning. Let's turn our attention to Cork GAA. And I'm delighted to say Michael Moynihan of the Irish Examiner is with us. He's literally written the book on economics in the GAA. Michael, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, lads. How are you?
Yeah, good. This is a really interesting story where Sports Direct have come in and a deal has been certainly broken in the papers, not formally officially announced yet by the Cork County Board, but we understand it's of the magnitude of around 400 grand a year, and it's a 5-year deal. And John Fogarty had an interesting detail in his piece today in your paper, where the money's going to be paid up front every year, which kind of gives some security to Cork GAA at a time when their economics and their finances haven't been great. So how big a story is this in Cork GAA at the moment, Michael, and what does it feel like in terms of trying to rebalance the disparity between Cork and Dublin at the moment in those terms, really? Where do Cork GAA people feel about this?
Well, you put your finger on there, Ger. I think obviously Dublin are the pace setters when it comes to funding and achievement and parlaying that funding into achievement. And I suppose it's interesting to see people's opinions in Cork break along predictable lines. There is a school of thought that says, no matter where the money comes from, if my team gets it, that's good, and that will make us more competitive. And there's another school of thought which is a little more reticent, and there's a lot more trepidation about what Sports Direct brings with them. They obviously have a lot of associations that people might be uncomfortable with. And you mentioned John's piece today, which is very good, which makes a very good point about local retailers in Cork, who I'd say have a lot of trepidation about what a Sports Direct superstore means for Cork. Sports Direct are opening a big store on Patrick Street, and that will have ramifications obviously for local sports outlets like Cummins Sports, which is intimately involved with Cork for decades. So there's a parallel track. There's an acknowledgement obviously that as you say, the economics mean that every inter-county team needs substantial resources. But there's also a degree of, I wouldn't say unhappiness, but discomfort maybe with some of the aspects of Sports Direct dealings in the past.
Where are Cork at the moment in terms of being financially independent and standing on their own 2 feet? Because it's been a fairly torrid 18 months or so, it seems, from the outside.
Well, how long do you have? It's a very twisted story, because there's still a lack of clarity about Páirc Uí Chaoimh, the extent of the debt, what created the overrun, what the ramifications are for the GAA as a whole. By the way, I've been in other counties and had a frosty reception when you unveil the Cork accent, because a lot of other counties are blaming a lack of investment on the amount that has to go to Cork to cover the stadium debt. But in terms of the day-to-day running, and this has been a long-standing principle of the county board, that the Páirc Uí Chaoimh debt doesn't have an impact on the preparation of teams. Because Cork is a competitive dual county, I think they spent almost 1.2 million on team preparation last year across both codes. So there's a substantial amount that needs to be generated every year for teams without ever going near the stadium debt and the stadium debt is unfortunately something that's going to be an issue for, I would say, a decade or two to come.
Right, that's a perpetual millstone around the neck, and parallel to this, you need to generate enough funds to try and get the games development officers to try and build up the programmes that have been successful in urban areas in Dublin and roll those out across Cork, which has its own unique geographical challenges. It's a massive county, like physically, and trying to, it's probably much easier to share a games development officer between a club and a bunch of different schools in an urban area like Dublin than it is, say, in West Cork or East Cork. So there are very unique challenges that the Cork County Board face. How are they doing with that? Like, what's the kind of sense that because it's a fairly new regime there, the last 18 months as well, last year?
There is, and to be fair, I think people are willing to give a new regime, obviously, a chance to bed in and to give it a fair shake, etc. They got off to a fairly shaky start, though, with there was a little controversy last year about the size of the deficit they were running when the County Board announced $500,000 and one of their own committees corrected them and said it was $2.5 million. So this is leading to a lot of unhappiness then amongst clubs in Cork. And you're quite right, Cork's pride enjoys the fact that there's over 200 clubs, which is great when you want to say you have more clubs than anybody else, but which is not so great in a lot of other ways, including GDAs and sharing them. And there have been a couple of initiatives tried in that sense where 2 or 3 clubs have come together and try and do so. But Cork has the kind of, in some sense, the worst of both worlds. It's a large urban centre with a strong GAA tradition, but there are a lot of clubs there fighting for resources. It also has tiny clubs in remote areas in circumstances you may be associated with the west of Ireland, say, or the Western Seaboard. So, the Cork's challenges are diverse. And I think, look, you put your finger on it in the sense that, what works in County X won't work in County Y. And Cork is the special case, no pun intended. But, there are a lot of challenges for Cork. And unfortunately, the bottom line, it keeps circling back to, what a lot of clubs say, look, can it possibly be feasible to say that a huge debt of over €30 million has no impact on how, clubs are supported or how the inter-county teams are resourced? And for a lot of people, that circle can't be squared.
Has there been, I guess, not complaints, but has there been any suggestion that the lack of finance or perhaps more finance would increase the chances of winning All-Irelands in both codes? Has there been a sense that the inter-county teams have been under-resourced in comparison to, say, how Dublin have been resourced at inter-county level over the last few years?
I suppose you could say that in every county, couldn't you? That every county is looking at Dublin, without picking on Dublin, and saying, well, if we had X amount, if we had the resources that they have, we'd be more competitive. And I think that narrative is interesting in the sense that it's become an accepted principle that, if we had more money, we'd be more competitive, which doesn't always follow. There are plenty of, counties with a lot of money which aren't competitive. Well, not plenty, but a few. But certainly, it depends on what you are trying to get out of the GAA in your county. If you want a thriving GAA structure within the county with plenty of games and a feasible calendar for adult players, that's one challenge. But if you want a competitive inter-county team, and when we say competitive, a team that's winning provincial or All-Ireland titles, can you really have that and have a competitive structure within the county and have that in football and hurling? And, when you look at Dublin and the fact that they're a case apart, you have to wonder at some counties whether that's feasible for them to pursue.
I suppose that's the big question about Cork, is that it feels like there is enough multinational industry, there is enough population, there's enough clubs that you should be able to pursue it on both sides. And yet, if you look back over the last kind of 3 or 4 seasons, with various managers, there's been definitely stories of players not being happy with how the county board are responding to them. There was a story about the footballers having to set up their own gym, and then there was a dispute about that. That was a couple of years back. And then you had a line in your piece yesterday, Mike, about there being tensions between the hurlers and the county board, and the hurlers not actually showing up to the launch of the One Cork, which was trying to bring the whole fundraising and philosophy, I guess, together under one umbrella. What were those tensions about?
Well, those tensions related directly to resourcing and getting the equipment and material needed, as you say, to mount a meaningful challenge at senior inter-county level. Now, the question is whether those are structural problems that go to the heart of the relationship or just the kind of tension that leads to, I won't say a fit of pique, but a disagreement that's easily resolved and, normal service resumes within a couple of months. But this comes back to my point that the line that, the financial issues engulfing Cork and Kiev don't have any impact or bearing on what happens with the senior intercounty teams is a very hard one to sustain, because the evidence, as you say, is available that, the team players can sometimes be a little less than gruntled with the level of support that they are getting from the county board. I suppose that's probably the nicest way of phrasing it.
Well, it's interesting because obviously Sports Direct, they want the ambassadors, the players, they need those players to be front and centre of the ad campaign, and obviously they're going to have certain rights as part of the deal. If the hurlers or the footballers don't feel like they're getting what they need or what other counties are getting, then are the players going to put the county in breach of contract? And we've seen Sports Direct, if there's a breach of contract, they will pin you to the wall for every last cent.
Yes, I'm informed that the powers that be in Cork are very, very much aware of Sports Direct's form in that regard. I wouldn't see that being a huge issue, because you have to remember, I suppose, players are human too, and they like the spotlight, and I'm sure to be a consideration for their services when it comes to publicising products and goods, etc. There's a whole other. There's a whole other argument that flips out of that, and you would say, well, Gillette game is very popular in Cork. It's a big urban centre. There's a captive audience. So you have to ask why, over the years, the Cork players haven't been used by the board or sponsors more in the past to leverage their fame to the board's advantage, to the GAA's advantage in Cork. But my understanding is that, as you say, Chill would be very keen on that kind of partnership. So I would anticipate more of those PR occasions coming on stream when they finally get their feet under the table. But you touched on it earlier, Ger, when you talked about the economics of the GAA. It's a very complicated situation, because people have been quick enough to point out to me that an organisation that wraps itself in community values, and with good reason, and as we saw in the lockdown, in fairness, the GAA did a lot of fantastic work all over the community. There can be a cognitive dissonance between that concept and engaging commercially with, kind of elbows out, tough companies who, as you say, wouldn't be reticent when it comes to insisting on their rights. So there's a dissonance, I'd put it no more strongly than that, involved there, I think.
It's interesting then that you mentioned that perhaps there's been a feeling that inter-county teams have been slightly under-resourced a little bit, and that there might be a little bit of disagreement between the players and what they see as the way forward for Cork. At the same time, Michael, if they want to contend and they feel they have been under-resourced, then something like the Sports Direct deal is the exact sort of thing that they probably require to be able to contend at inter-county level in both codes.
Yeah, and again, to circle back to a point made earlier, something as simple as the fact that Sports Direct are paying upfront does make a difference, because I think if you drilled into a few of the sponsorship deals around the country, what you'll find is they can be performance related. There can be deferred payments depending on where and when the county exits the championship. So in and of itself, that's a huge plus. If Sports Direct pays up on 15th of January or whatever date the inter-county season will start, that's a big help, because the traditional complaint you hear from county players all over Ireland is that, I didn't get my wet gear until July, or I didn't get my second pair of boots until October when we were out of the championship. That kind of miscommunication or misstep. So it also comes back to a point I made earlier, which is are you happy that your team, the team that you follow or the team that you support, is resourced, and are you not too particular about where those resources come from?
Man City fans we've seen sports fans tend to care most about results. That's the thing. That's why they choose to spend their free time watching sport, really.
Yeah, I suppose. But if I flip that around, then you kind of say, well, do we really absolve ourselves or abdicate any kind of responsibility at all? Are we happy to do a deal with Egan if it means we can get an extra set of footballs, etc.? It's an interesting test case, because it also does introduce a very harsh note of reality, and that is, Cork County Board can say, look, we've done a very good bit of business. We're in the middle of a pandemic, a rolling lockdown. There's huge uncertainty going forward, and here we are. We have signed a deal which is worth more than the last deal. And if we win an All-Ireland, we'll actually double the value of the deal. So in strict business terms, they have played a blinder. But it's just interesting to me that there is an undercurrent of dissatisfaction as well. It just shows that, I suppose you can't please all the people all the time.
No, it's a really complicated situation. That community values issue that you raised there, I mean, you've seen people complain about AIB in the past, and that's a bank that has grown from our country. It is the bank of most people in Ireland, and there are people who are critical of their involvement. And I can totally understand why people are critical, but I can totally understand why if you're the bank that works and lives and all your employees are here, that you want to invest in the community that your place is from. And I can see why sports director coming in and saying, well, these are the community values. It's also a massive opportunity for us to sell these cool jerseys. I guess this is the core tension that exists within the GAA, really.
Yeah, I mean, tension is the best word. You couldn't say it's a conflict, and at the same time, you can't say people are happy to, switch off their consciences. But, there is a growing awareness, I think, within people in the GAA who give some consideration to this, that the growing need for resources from every country, not just Cork and not just Dublin, is putting pressure on where the GAA maybe should be focusing in terms of games development and getting people to get involved in Gaelic games. I mean, it all comes back to me to what is the GAA's core purpose? To me, it's a game development or games promotion body. So in that sense, obviously intercounty games are a great way to promote their games. But also, if that becomes the tail wagging the dog, where everything has to revolve around resourcing that, something's going to suffer. And to me, the obvious place that cuts will have to be made would be, say, in your community GDA or GDO who can't get into 3 schools, can only go to 1 school because the intercounty team needs those resources.
Yeah, and that's completely the wrong way to go about life, because ultimately it's about participation and getting people to go down and play, and when they're finished playing, to become coaches and administrators and to have a lifelong relationship with the club. And what's the best way of doing that? That's, I guess, the fundamental question we're all trying to answer. Mike, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
No problem. Thanks, lads.
Michael Moynihan there from the Irish Examiner, who literally, as I said, wrote the book GAA Economics. Worth digging out if you've got any interest in how we've arrived at the situation that we find ourselves in. Right, it is 9:07 this morning. I'm going to tell you what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. At noon, it's World Cup Revisited, Spain 82. Again, some of those matches on over Christmas. Great opportunity to sit and watch what it was actually like at that time. Ronnie Delaney on OTB Gold, talking about his gold medal. Dadcast from 3, Mount Rushmore at 4 o'clock today. Kildare, controversial enough in the end. OTB Gold, Ger Eoin talking about Ali. Ger Eoin at 90, I think, has a new book coming out. And then tonight, it's Breedsack in Australia. It's Connacht's Tom Daly, and Dan McDonnell on The Football Show is live tonight from 7 o'clock. Up next, we're talking Mayo football, and then Deal or No Deal with Nathan.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
They spoke about your arm not being down beside your side. I mean, this is not Irish dancing.
OTB Sports Radio.
Basketball would have been my main game.
The brand new sports radio station from Off the Ball.
That's my point. Don't play for us if you're a proud Englishman.
Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Alexa.
You have a whole new world of possibilities.
Now available on otbsports.com.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
Follow the leader, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. The world's best-selling plug-in hybrid is now available with 0% finance and a free home charge point worth €800. Leading the charge in plug-in hybrid technology, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. Book a test drive at your local dealer today. Mitsubishi, drive your ambition. Terms and conditions apply. See mitsubishimotors.ie. Lending criteria applies. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
I'm going to refrain from wishing you a Happy New Year. I'm sick of it, literally.
No, okay,
if anybody wishes me a Happy New Year, second weekend of January.
You're not having it?
second week of the January, no, I'm not having. As soon as you hit double digits, that's got to be the limit in January. 10th of January, that's got to be it, surely.
I think if you haven't seen somebody or haven't spoken to them...
No, I don't. No, even then, it's an absolute stretch, like, you know what I mean?
But it's just goodwill, Kenny. It's not like there's anything...
Very awkward. I think it's tokenism. I don't think it is even goodwill, to be honest with you. It's just tokenism, isn't it? People are kind of... They say without even thinking about it. Don't even realise what they're saying. It makes you feel awkward when you receive it because there's that obligation, you've got to say it back, which I don't like, but even still, it creates a little bit of attention there when there's no need for it.
Have you a general cut-off, or are you just, there is a point that somewhere you feel your way into the year and you think, right, that's enough now?
I don't have a cut-off because I don't really engage in it too much. I never quite understand the Happy New Year one. I just don't get involved full stop. Not put myself up as a Victor Meldrew type of character here, you know. I'm very happy-go-lucky.
I mean, you might not be putting yourself up like that, Kenny, but that's...
Anyway, moving on.
Yes, indeed, moving on. Right. Happy New Year to everybody out there. OK, later on this hour, we're going to give you the chance to catch Ronan O'Gara on Monday Night Rugby from last night's OTB. First, here he is talking about Jack Carty, about what he needs to do to become Ireland's 10.
I know he was saying it in the interview we had with him there that, you know, if he doesn't get called up and he's playing well, he's okay with it because he's just happy in his game. But I would imagine there'd have to be a bit of eagerness to get back into an Ireland shirt so that the 2019 World Cup isn't the kind of the lingering memory of international rugby.
Yeah, of course. He's got to comment like that because he plays his rugby in Ireland and he's a respectful guy, but he'd be fuming. And if you're not fuming, there's something wrong with you. So, you know, he's a competitor. He wants to win, but he obviously puts the team first, and that's what good tens do. He realises that, you know, if Connacht go well, he has a better chance of being in an Irish team, and it's of interest to him also because we all know too, if your team is going forward, your halfbacks look better. So the more Connacht Pack goes forward, the better himself, and they've got two good nines there that will look good. So, yeah, of course it'll hurt, but like it's important that I think sometimes you know, I mean, people, you gotta keep producing consistently to play Test rugby. You know what I mean? To step up from Pro 14 to playing you know what I mean, a Test match, especially in, you know, Millennium Stadium or Stade de France or Twickenham or Murrayfield, it's very, very different to playing you know what I mean, a so-called Test game for Ireland against the Tier 2 nation in the Aviva. It's different, completely different, Neil.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, as we've kind of said for the last few months, there's a gap in the market for an Irish out half to nail his place down and put himself firmly as, for now anyway, maybe the backup to Johnny Sexton, but to be a long-term heir. Yeah,
exactly. There is huge opportunities because, I mean, between the ages of 28 to probably 30, you peak as a 10. And so obviously all the guys that are looking to try and get into the number 2 slot, they're all on, you know what I mean, none of them are near 30 yet. So there's a great opportunity for one of them to grasp it. And I think that's what Irish rugby needs because they most definitely need Johnny performing, but also with that, you know, it's a 23-man game at this stage, and you know that with the turmoil and the what's the word when it's the attritional rate of Test rugby for 80 minutes, it's highly unlikely that, you mean, the fellow that you start with finishes the game. Those days are over in rugby. It's just become 2 men sharing the job.
That's Ronan O'Gara speaking on Monday Night Rugby. We'll bring you that full thing in about 15-20 minutes time. At 13 minutes past 9 though, Nathan Murphy, good morning to you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
How long have we got? A week? Another week? One more week? 2 days?
No. Yeah, Friday, I think. Friday is the end point.
All right.
First time you meet somebody. Is that not
fair enough? No, Kenny wasn't having that. I think it's tokenism.
Well, tokenism, yeah. I think for the next week you can get away with saying it to somebody the first time you meet them.
Richie Heenan on Twitter, things that have arrived after David Clarke made his Mayo GAA debut: Bluetooth, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, smartphones, Blu-ray, smoking ban, the stand in McHale Park, and Oisin Mullen's first words. He's been around a long time.
Yeah, geez, he's had a heck of a career. 15 seasons between his first start in an All-Ireland final and his last start in an All-Ireland final. He was there back in 06 starting. He was around the squad in 04. So in terms of longevity and what he has done, if you're picking an all-time Mayo 1 to 15, the number one is a very easy decision. It is David Clarke. His shot-stopping ability, the amount of games he kept Mayo in because of that. He's one of Mayo's greatest ever players. And I remember growing up and you'd hear about David Clarke. He's only a couple of years younger than me, and everyone knew from a very young age that he was the real deal, that he was going to go on and have a very long career. But to go on and play for nearly 20 years with the senior team is a hell of an achievement, and he's going to be a huge loss for Mayo. I know there've been debates around obviously the Rob Henley, David Clarke thing, but like for Clarke, I'd say in terms of what he brings around a professionalism, generally comes across as a pretty quiet guy, gets on with his business, your typical goalkeeper, methodical in everything he does. That to lose a presence like him and like Donny Vaughan at the same time, when they do go back in over the next few weeks or months, it'll be a very different place.
Yeah, you felt like maybe this was going to be one of those seasons where there were fewer inter-county retirements than usual, because the rollover from last year's All-Ireland final to next season is actually pretty quick, looks like. Obviously, it's been delayed by a couple of weeks, but not the case in Mayo.
Well, it doesn't seem to be the case anywhere. We're seeing the likes of Jonathan Lynn and Graham Riley and Meath, that quite a few players have actually decided now is the time. I think there was a feeling that some of these older Mayo players, maybe Clarke is something of a surprise because obviously he started an All-Ireland final 2 weeks ago. Donny Vaughan had injury problems, wasn't really involved at all this year. The likes of Shamie O'Shea said injury problems, wasn't involved. I wonder will Keith Higgins come back for another year? So from James Horan's point of view, I'm sure he'd love to keep them around for another 6-7 months, as you say, and try and sell it as that. But a lot of these players have just given so much over the last decade. And like Clarke, the one story I remember hearing about Clarke was that obviously the Henley decision for the replay in 2016 is one that comes up time and time again, is just the sort of character that he showed after that he didn't let it affect him outwardly in any way, that there was obviously devastation around him that this had happened and he'd be dropped for the replay, but that he did what you would want any good team player to do. He put his head down and he got behind Rob Henley and got behind him in a way of what an opportunity for Rob Henley to go and win All-Ireland with Mayo. So they're the type of people you want in your squad, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Clarke is back in some way over the coming years as part of a coaching ticket.
All right. It's amazing that OTB over the past few years has lauded this Mayo side to a much greater extent than the actual sides that won All-Ireland, says Will on YouTube this morning.
It's just not the case. Like, we can sit here all day and laud this Dublin side. We laud them all the time. All the time. Yeah.
Other sides have won All-Ireland in the last 10 years as well. I think Will is right.
He means Kerry and Donegal.
Well, I think Kerry get probably their fair dues as well. Donegal are the ones who maybe can feel a little bit hard done by, because there's a certain romanticism around Donegal's re-emergence over the last decade. But like we talk about, like Kerry did nothing this year, did nothing last year, yet still they get spoken about as if they're right there, as if they're just on the tails of this great Dublin side, where clearly they're not.
Okay, we'll come back to this. It's 18 minutes past 9. It's time for Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing, isn't it? Right, Liverpool's festive and New Year dip, as it's now being called. Where should Jurgen Klopp be looking in the transfer market this January, or should he be shopping for players at all, Nathan?
Yeah, I think he's got to be looking at centre-back. The fact that he's playing Jordan Henderson there suggests that he doesn't trust Nate Phillips or Reece Williams. Like, Nate Phillips is 23. He was out on loan last season at Wolfsburg. There was a sense he was going to go in the summer transfer window, and then needs must, he's forced into action. Reece Williams is still a very young, inexperienced player. You would think if he felt one of them was going to be an adequate replacement, you played him as much as possible. Where it feels at the moment, if he's stuck and he needs a bit of freshness, he'll throw one of them in. But that, I just can't see how he can continue with constantly rotating his centre-backs for every single game, which is what it is at the moment, because Joel Matip simply can't stay fit. So he's going to have to go and look. It's a difficult market, because it's not just a case of, say, looking around the Premier League and, you know, teams that are in the bottom half and who's a good centre-half. It's a Ben Mee or a Tarkowski at Burnley or a Lewis Dunk at Brighton. He needs a defender who can play in his system, who can play that incredibly high line. So there's not many of them around, you would think. Does he go after Alaba at Bayern Munich? Would Bayern Munich sell, considering Liverpool are one of their two best rivals for the Champions League. You know, would Bayern hang on for the 6 months and just let his contract run down rather than let him leave right now in January? So there's not a huge amount of options out there for Klopp, but whatever is available, he's got to go and do something, because this can't continue. This is going to hamper.
Well, hang on a second, right? So it's not like it was the defence that meant that they didn't beat Newcastle, and they only conceded 1 against Southampton, and the West Brom game was only a concession of a goal, and the Fulham game, was that a 1-1 draw as well? Like, it's actually their inability to score goals against inferior, supposedly inferior opposition that's really costing them at the moment.
Yeah, look, the front three aren't firing in any way, and like Firmino's form has been inconsistent for going on a year at this stage. Sadio Mane hasn't got to the level he's been at last year so far this season, where I think Salah's been the one at times dragging them through. And you'd wonder as well about the relationship at times between Salah and Mane. It doesn't ever seem to be particularly strong. But everything Liverpool do as a team is built as a team. So the defence is a key part of the attack, and the attack is a key part of the defence. So you need the front three pressing high to make sure that the back four can push right up the pitch. And there's no question that they're missing Virgil van Dijk's passing ability, that when teams are sat back, that he can rake this 70, 80-yard ball out. And how many times did you see it to Alexander-Arnold or to Robertson? Liverpool now, like last night, Liverpool, it reminded me of the Spurs-Arsenal game from a month ago. And Liverpool were Arsenal. That's how bad they were. It was so predictable, never-ending crosses into the box. And I think a month ago when we were talking about Arsenal, we said, well, look at where Liverpool crossed the ball. They cross it from far deeper when Alexander-Arnold and Robertson are coming onto it. Now, whether teams have copped onto that or whether actually the fact that Van Dijk isn't there and they're picking the ball up in different positions. Like, Robertson's crosses were all from that position, just on the edge of the area, easy to defend. They look like last-ditch tackles, but they're simple enough clearances. So I think actually, while Liverpool are probably never going to have too many of the Aston Villa days where there's a full meltdown, that even conceding a goal a game is worse than they were last season, and that also they need the defence to be a part of the attack, and they need to be sure that the defence is rock solid so that Alexander-Arnold and Robertson can get forward as often as they want. Like, one of the reasons that Robertson is so good is because he had Van Dijk alongside him and he could go forward and know that Van Dijk would always be there. Alexander-Arnold, we know, isn't as strong defensively as Robertson. And who does he have alongside him? Reece Williams, Nate Phillips, Jordan Henderson. You know, if they could keep Joel Matip fit, but there's nothing we've seen to suggest that he's going to stay fit. And the other question Liverpool have, I know people say it's January, do you go and spend 40, 50 million? Well, what is the long-term future? So when Virgil van Dijk comes back, you know, he's going to be heading for 30. Joe Gomez is the one they're putting a lot of trust in. But again, he's always injured and has another long-term serious knee injury that at some stage you just need to go, well, maybe we need another centre-half partner for Virgil van Dijk for 2 or 3 years. Maybe we need to go and buy that player. We're thinking about waiting for another 18 months and we just need to get him in now because needs must, because a title could be gone. A title can go very quickly. And Liverpool have already cost themselves the Champions League by dithering, by not going and signing a goalkeeper and sticking with Loris Karius. That cost them a Champions League title. So you would hope that they've learned their lesson from that and realised that you just can't hang around, that you go and spend the money and you find the player.
The difficulty is that they got not so lucky, but there was a little bit of fortune regarding how good Virgil van Dijk has been, that there was always a chance that with that massive transfer fee, he wouldn't reach the heights that he did, like becoming the best defender in the world. I'm not sure was that actually the expectation from Liverpool fans. They expect him to be good, but not best defender in the world level. So the bar is so high now, Nathan, for this next defensive transfer to hit, that if you're talking about a long-term successor in the centre of defence, God, you can't even afford like a Harry Maguire-esque signing a la Manchester United at this point. It needs to be a 70-80% of Van Dijk's success.
Yeah, that's almost impossible to find. But I do think, maybe not, I don't know about all Liverpool supporters, but you talk to people who know about centre-halves, talk to Gary Breen. When Liverpool were on the verge of signing Van Dijk that January, Gary Breen was saying that this guy is going to be that transformative figure at the back of the defence. Like, did anyone expect him to go on and become the best centre-half in the world? I'm not sure, but I think expectations were incredibly high. They knew what they were getting. There's a reason that every top club were interested in signing Van Dijk. I just think that, like, Liverpool have two options. You sign a stopgap and you spend 35 million and hope it works and gets you through somehow to the end of the season. Or you just go and you spend the 50 million, 50, 60 million on someone you've been eyeing up. And we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Liverpool do their business very quietly. They pop up with a Diogo Jota and everyone goes, oh, Jota was barely even playing for Wolves for a lot of last season. And again, he comes in and straight away you see a bit of a transformation, how he fits into a system. So that's why I think Liverpool would be looking for a defender, not just an experienced old head who can come in, actually somebody who can play in that incredibly high line, that incredibly high press that Liverpool want to go with, that's what Jurgen Klopp is going to want. And it may be somebody that's not on that sort of regular shortlist that you see of Alaba, Upamecano, that a lot of other clubs are interested in. He may be looking for a very different type of defender.
Yeah, look, their scouting system should be able to belch several names out that would be suitable for that. And I think, to Owen's point, that actually anybody who comes in, once Van Dijk comes back, is going to look pretty good if they can stay fit. All you have to do is be his partner, and you will look good because he is so good. Like, you know, there will be a bedding in period, obviously. You will have to get through the initial baptism of fire when you don't have him. But if you can survive that, then it's going to be a success, more than likely, because of the quality of the defensive shield they have in their midfield trio, and also then whoever plays beside him as well. Rumours yesterday, though, that Madrid had won the race for David Alaba, so that's the deal or no deal on that one. Richard Redball says, Nathan holding back the Liverpool tears, and Shane saying, can't wait to hear Nathan defend Liverpool performance and then run down United performances. It hasn't happened, Shane. He compared them to Arsenal at their worst. Things are obviously pretty bad.
Yeah, it's going to be that sort of season. I'm sure, like Miguel Delaney was pointing it out last night, that like, and it goes with Rory Smith's column as well. I don't know if you read that, about there've been so many games all the time, and that they're all on television, that there's very little time to actually pause for breath and go, well, here's what's developing, because like Arsenal are in crisis. Like last time we spoke before Christmas, Arsenal are in absolute crisis, and then they go and win 3 games, and maybe Arteta's finally starting to find his feet. The one thing for Liverpool actually is there is a break now for them. Okay, they've got the cup game against Villa. I presume Liverpool certainly will put out a second string side for that.
Not what David Meyler thought. Not what he says. He reckons 5 or 6. The front 3 will probably play, because there's a week between. That game's on Friday night, and the United game is the following Sunday
week. So there's 9 games. But there's, from a league point of view, there is actually a lot of time for Liverpool to have to sit through this now, where Manchester United have another game. The chances are United are going to go to Anfield top of the league ahead of Liverpool. So for once, there's actually going to be a bit of a talking point, a bit of a story in the build-up to a game, rather than it just being different teams playing different days, that actually now we have a full-on discussion around a title race involving Liverpool, involving Manchester United, and maybe more importantly, and I'm sure he's loving this conversation that's going on and going to go on, around Manchester City, who are just sitting there, a couple of games in hand, ready to pounce.
Yeah, no, definitely City looking pretty good at the moment. So the Independent in London report that Chelsea are ready to give Frank Lampard time to turn things back on track. Tuchel, Allegri, Brendan Rodgers, Hasenhüttl, Andrei Shevchenko have all been linked with the club. Shevchenko will be the most Chelsea signing as their manager of all time. Will Lampard be the Chelsea manager at the end of the Premier League season, and who would your replacement be?
I think he will be the manager at the end of the season. Again, it's just happening so quickly. When do you find the time to sack him? Like, is this the time now when there's a little bit of a break and there's an FA Cup game and you give a manager a full week to try and settle in? The one issue around Lampard, and the problem he faces, and you'll have seen this as a player, is that it generally works for Chelsea when they sack their manager. When they bring in an Avram Grant or Roberto Di Matteo, that they make an impact. That changing manager has historically worked for Roman Abramovich. Sticking and whether it was Antonio Conte and just letting it sort of ride out till the end of the season, hasn't. So he won't be wary, I think, of even an Andrei Shevchenko. Who would have thought that Avram Grant and Roberto Di Matteo would enjoy success with Chelsea when they come in as caretaker managers? Like maybe Shevchenko, does this current team look at Shevchenko as a superstar and someone they'll respond to? I just think it's very hard to find a spot at the moment to sack him, and that maybe his legendary status might just get him to the end of the season. But if they don't finish top 4, it's hard to see how he survives past the end of the season.
They need to see an uptick in form. They need to see the players that they invested all that money in showing some signs that they're playing up to the level of the investment. A reminder, OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. The Mirror reports this morning that Crystal Palace, West Ham and Burnley are in a 3-way race to sign Irish young gun Jason Knight. According to the Star, it's a 4-way. Newcastle are also in the mix. Where do you think the 19-year-old rising Derby star will end up? Is he ready to play Premier League football?
Well, Derby are on the verge of a takeover at the moment. So while teams might be trying to steal in there ahead of that, if that takeover happens, if Wayne Rooney is given the job on a full-time permanent basis, you'd imagine they'd be mad keen to keep Jason Knight. He's played pretty much every game so far this season. So even though he's only 19, I don't think Derby will want to let him go, and certainly won't want to let him go on the cheap. You often hear the debate about, well, should he stay, should he go? But if you're offered the chance to go to a Premier League team, there's very few players that are going to turn that down. Derby are in a relegation fight. So you would hope that once the behind-the-scenes dealings and the takeover goes through, that they should settle and survive in the Championship, but that's at least another 18 months in the Championship. Whereas any ambitious player is thinking, all right, Burnley, I can force my way in. Newcastle, I can force my way in. They're not thinking, oh, well, you might be stuck on the bench half the time, not getting quite as much football. So I think if one of those clubs with a big bid come in and Derby accept it, I'm sure he'd go. But if he was to wait another 18 months, is he suddenly at a different level of club that he's going to? Like, Burnley is a strange one in that if we've seen, Kevin Long, Jimmy Dunn, Sean Dyche doesn't change his team. Is he looking for a central midfielder to come in instead of Brownhill or Westwood, whoever he's playing in there at the moment? He doesn't change his 11 all that often, even in these sort of crazy run of games. Newcastle, how long is Steve Bruce going to last? They haven't really settled on a central midfield ever. He looks good enough to get into any of those teams, but they all have a little bit going on in the background that you'd kind of worry about for him.
Okay, is there a comparison, like a player that he reminds you of? What type of midfielder is he?
Box to box. Loves to get a lot of energy.
I'm hearing Roy Keane.
You were going to go Roy Keane. I was going to go slightly further down the pecking order and say, was there a time that maybe similar clubs he's been linked to, a Jeff Hendrick when he was starting off? Maybe not quite, but yeah, it's an important move from. The last thing you want is to make that move and then spend the rest of the season getting the odd minute or two here and there.
Yeah.
So I just think that the fact that Derby takeover is happening and due to happen in the next couple of weeks, surely they're not going to let him leave.
Okay, so we brought you news yesterday. PSG boss Mauricio Pochettino has his eyes on Harry Kane, Dele Alli and Hugo Lloris. The latest update is that Ali is not expected to go in this window. We do want to know, how excited are you, Nathan, to see Pochettino in Paris? Is there a Premier League side who will regret not snapping him up?
Is anyone excited about anything that happens in Paris Saint-Germain? I'm not sure they are. If he goes and he dips back into the Premier League and suddenly Dele Alli goes, you're probably going to keep a closer eye, but they're going to win the league. That's a given. What can he do with them in the latter stages of the Champions League is what it's all going to come down to. If Dele Alli at Paris Saint-Germain, not the same level of pressure week in, week out, going to probably get a little bit more time on the ball, and obviously has a good relationship with Mauricio Pochettino, even though we saw in the documentary Jose having the chat with both Dele and with Harry of, yes, you can love your former manager, but that doesn't mean you can't love me as well. It does seem to have worked with Harry Kane, not quite the same with Dele Alli. What Premier League club right now was he going to go to? Chelsea? Possibly. Manchester United, that ship seems to have sailed till the end of this season at the very least, if not a year, 18 months down the line. So this is a good deal for Pochettino. It'll be a big contract, a club where you're guaranteed a certain level of success, where you're going to win some trophies guaranteed, but it's pressure in a different way in that it all comes down to Champions League quarterfinal, Champions League semi-final. These are the games you simply have to win. But he needs to improve that squad as well. While they've got an unbelievable front three, behind that, there's not a huge amount for those bigger games.
Okay, go on.
I can already hear this clip going viral in Lille and Lyon as Nathan Murphy, Irish broadcaster, slams PSG's competitors. They're third in Ligue 1, Nathan.
Yeah, but it's been an unusual season.
By a point. TalkSport report that Declan Rice is Chelsea's only transfer target and they want to get that deal done in this window. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is that to happen in January, and what impact does Rice make at a club like Chelsea?
Well, I'd say that's a 3 out of 10 for January. Probably heading towards an 8 or 9 for next summer. Every time I watch Declan Rice, I'm more and more impressed. He's adding something to his game, his range of passing. He's still able to sit in that more holding role, but constantly bombing forward now, constantly involved in the attack. It's a bit of a sickener when you watch Declan Rice play for West Ham, and it's only a matter of time before he goes to one of the biggest clubs in the Premier League or anywhere, because he's that good. He is going to be in that top rung of midfielders in world football, you feel, very, very soon, which is unfortunate. It does seem as though I'm sure Lampard would fit him in as well. He's never quite, that's one of the problems, Lampard's never quite settled on that midfield. You know, N'Golo Kante's back in his preferred role at the weekend, but then the games before that, Jorginho's is the holding midfielder and Kante's sort of forced out to the right-hand side. Never been a particular fan of Kovacic in there. Still hasn't really given Kai Havertz a chance as a number 8, but maybe if you've Declan Rice as the 6, Havertz alongside him, does it spell the end of N'Golo Kante if Declan Rice comes? Maybe it does.
Yeah, you know, all of a sudden you've got that squad depth and a bit of competition as well. ESPN reporting that Man City hope to pick up Sergio Ramos on a free transfer in the summer. Should they sign the 34-year-old, and how would he adapt to life in the Premier League?
I see this as more of a Manchester United signing than a Manchester City signing. City have finally settled on something that works at the back. Ruben Diaz has come in and made the sort of impact, probably a little bit more under the radar than what Virgil van Dijk did at Liverpool. But Diaz has come in, plays every game, and they sort of rotate the partner alongside him, whether it's Stones or whether it's Nathan Ake, that they have now a rock-solid back four. Do you need to add a Sergio Ramos into that? Everything that was said about Diaz coming in is that he is a big character, that he is a leader, that although he's a very young player, he's someone who's not just going to come in and need a little bit of betting in time. He's going to become the rock at the heart of that defence, and he's lived up to that. Whereas actually, maybe looking at Manchester United, maybe another leader in that dressing room is exactly what they need. Somebody to share the burden a bit with Bruno Fernandes, and somebody who, you know, can slot in, doesn't need to play every single match because they've got a lot of options at the back. So I'm just not sure where Sergio Ramos fits in to that City team right now. Suddenly you're rotating 3 or 4 centre-backs alongside Diaz, where, you know, he might be the perfect personality to fit into a Manchester United dressing room.
Yeah, okay. Do City need anything?
A striker. Right? They need somehow to find a replacement for Sergio Aguero. Who that is, how you go and find that player, and does he cost you 200 million quid? Like, is it Harry Kane? Again, that ship is probably sailed at this stage, but like Jesus does a job, but you know, he doesn't look as though he's ever going to score the rate of goals that Sergio Aguero scored, where you knew if Aguero played, and he rarely did it, played 34, 35 games, he was going to get you 25 Premier League goals. Jesus just doesn't look to have that in him.
Right, that is today's Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros. After my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it, what have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We are going to hear from Cavan star Aisling Sheridan on tomorrow's show. She's playing with Collingwood in Australia. We're talking football with Daniel Harris, much more as well. Right now we're bringing you 20 minutes with Ron O'Gara. Enjoy.
All right, you're very welcome back to this Monday evening's Off the Ball. It is now time for Monday Night Rugby. Neil Tracy here with you this evening, and delighted to be joined at the moment by La Rochelle head coach Ronan O'Gara. Ronan, Happy New Year. How are you this evening?
Many happy returns, Neil. I'm good, yeah. Very well yourself?
I'm not too bad now. I imagine you're in a good mood after the weekend's result. Another win against Agen. Still top of the table in the top 14.
Yeah, going well, but Agen were weaker probably than I anticipated. And we had a poor start to the game, but managed to get our composure and get back into the game. And we're doing some good things. Obviously, it's nowhere near a sustained period of 80 minutes or anything like that, but signs are promising, and it's an enjoyable team to coach, and there's a good buzz in the camp, and we're going to Racing this weekend, so that will be a far more difficult task, but a task to be look forward to.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that Racing this weekend. They had a good win as well, just at the weekend gone, and Simon Zebo crossing for a try as well. Would you ever be in touch with Simon Zebo or Donnacha Ryan, any of those lads in the week leading up to a game, or would you just leave it till kind of after full time?
Well, I think it's a little bit different for Simon. Myself and Donnacha probably have played together, and obviously I played with Simon for a little bit as well, but there's a bit of a generation gap, but I've great admiration and time for Zeebs. I would be in constant, I suppose, communication with Ger Eoin, because I think I've always, I suppose, rated his brain. He's got a brilliant rugby brain. He's a very interesting guy to talk to about the game. He, when I was coaching in Racing, I think he opened my eyes to kind of how you can set up defensive line out forward pods to look at, to free up your so-called better defenders of your forwards to align them with your back. So he has some great ideas on the game, and he's always a great man to chat to. The only problem is that if you see him ringing you, you know you got to be on the phone for 80 minutes sometimes.
So is he someone, I know he probably fancies himself to play on for another 10 years or so, but is he someone, when he hangs up the boots, you could see taking on the whistle, being a coach?
Yeah, I think he would be very, very good. I think he has a very, I suppose he's very tolerant, I think, in his behaviours. I think that's very important. I think coaching the modern player. But he's also very wise, and he's also very open. And he's someone, I think, that if he doesn't play on, he'd be a shrewd acquisition by any coach, by any group. He's a top guy.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So, bit of news this afternoon. There was a bit of talk earlier on this morning about the French clubs not being too happy with the EPC or COVID protocols testing. I think, was it 5 or 6 days in advance? They were looking for 3. There's a bit of news this evening. The EPCR is saying their medical advisory group met to discuss protocols for the tournament. So they're saying no club participating in the Heineken Champions Cup or Challenge Cup has officially informed EPCR of any intention not to fulfil their remaining fixtures in the season. There's talk is that they have kind of said as well that they will be reviewing their protocols. Is that something that you'd been aware of teams in France were unhappy with?
Yeah, we were aware. I think obviously it was, I suppose, brought to our attention and highlighted by On. So I think they travelled to Leicester, and their club is shut now. So I don't think they'll play a game till the end of January in the top 14. And I was aware that they'd come out and said that they were retracting, or they were opting out of the Challenge Cup games. But that's obviously contrary to the statement you've just read out there. So I'm sure there'll be another few twists in this debate going forward. But it was encouraging to read, I suppose, Jackie Lorenzetti's words today, that it was Europe means so much to a lot of the French teams, and I think we definitely fit into that bracket too. Obviously, Racing have far more history in the competition than La Rochelle, but we have, I suppose, 9 points at this stage from 2 games. Obviously, one of them coming from 5 points, with Bath being not able to fulfil their fixture. But it's very soon, Neil, and the fact that we're meant to be going there the week after next. So we have had options in terms of provisional planning of A, B, C, and D all throughout the last 9 months, especially with COVID. But this is very, very challenging, but it's obviously a very exciting time for the club as well, in the fact that you get a result away to Bath and you beat Edinburgh at home, and you're in a quarter-final of a European Cup. That's why you get involved, and that's why you do hard pre-seasons, to get to these, I suppose, stages of the competition, especially for a club like La Rochelle, who were, 6 years ago in Pro D2. So we obviously want the games to go ahead, but it's the same as the concussion rule. It's the same as anything else. The health and safety of the players and, I suppose, the staff is of utmost importance. So we have to take that into account primarily. Yeah, and I suppose when you've been put into such a good position now where you have maximum points from those 2 games, you're going to be so eager to actually get back out against Bath next time and carry that on as well. I'm just going to break away very quickly because we've had a goal in the Premier League between Southampton and Liverpool, an early goal at St Mary's, and with the details is Peter Hood.
Southampton 1, Liverpool 0. Dreams start for the home side. Danny Ings within 2 minutes latching on to a free kick from Ward-Prowse to hook the ball over at Alisson and into the back of the net. It's Southampton 1, Liverpool 0.
Yeah, so Southampton 1-0 up on Liverpool. 8 minutes played there at St Mary's through that Danny Ings goal. Going to move to... You're smiling there?
No, I said that's not the news we wanted. That's
you're
not what
Liverpool,
we should have called for. Yes, big time, yeah.
We'll keep you updated over the next 10 minutes or so, don't worry. I am going to move on to the weekend's action here at home, though, because Connacht's big win against Leinster, first time in 19 years beating Leinster in Dublin. Jack Carty starring, like complete star of the show, 25 points for him. The joint most anyone has ever scored in a professional game against Leinster. He was on OTB AM this morning. We're just going to play a very short little clip before we get into it, where he was asked about his own form for the province over the last few years and whether he thinks he's been rewarded with enough Irish caps.
Look, I suppose if there was a squad name tomorrow and I wasn't to be named, I think I'd be okay with that, because I've actually played, or my performances of late have been okay, or have been sufficient for myself. But it was a case where maybe my performances weren't. I'd be disappointed not in the fact that I wasn't picked, but in the fact that I wasn't playing well. So I know if I continue to play well, that I'll get rewarded for it in that respect. But I'm just happy the way I'm playing. It's enjoyable playing rugby in Connacht at the moment, and I think that's the most important thing for me. So hopefully at the end of January or February something will come along. If it doesn't, look, I'll keep playing away, and hopefully we can win something here in Connacht.
And is that maturity relatively recent or new? Is that a point of peace that you've made? If I'm playing well and I know that I've done everything that I'm supposed to do, then that's outside of my control?
I think so, yeah. Look, you can't really control how other players are playing, or kind of what how selection's going to go. Obviously, in terms of the teams may play a bit differently, so they might be looking for different things in different players. But I think it was something that maybe 2 years ago, when I was playing really well and wasn't being picked, then I might have looked further afield to kind of test myself somewhere else. But it's nothing really. It's kind of out of your control. The only thing you can control is your own performance.
Jack Carty there speaking on OTB AM, and we'll actually play you out a little bit more of that later on in the hour as well. And a reminder as well, tomorrow we'll be speaking to his Connacht's teammate Tom Daly, who was also brilliant and scored a try in their win against Leinster at the weekend. Ronan, that was Jack Carty there on, I suppose, his international ambitions. Where would you put him in the pecking order at the moment?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I think there's a context, I suppose, that you have to give a little bit of background to where this result came from, because it's certainly when I had a bit of sketchy coverage on the bus coming home from Agen. I was trying to watch it, but I got glimpses of it before it froze now and then. And I'm correct in saying that Connacht came off a bitterly disappointing defeat to Ulster at home the previous week. Mm-hmm. So that was probably, so they came down and expectations were probably low, but there was obviously going to be a reaction, because from that performance, and I saw that game, Connacht were very, very disappointing at home. So Leinster, I would say, if you look at, certainly they're very experienced halfbacks. They had an experimental midfield and a very, very rookie back three, in the fact of, I think two of the back three were hugely inexperienced. But the other side of that is that if you're in the Leinster group, you're a quality player, so it doesn't really matter what age you are, what number of caps you have for the province. You have to be an extremely good player to get on the pitch, because their training, I know for a fact, will be of such high quality that you have to earn the right to play at the weekend. So I think where you have to give massive credit to Connacht is probably it wasn't sneaking over the line or a dogged performance against Leinster. The rugby they played and the opportunities they took and they created for themselves to put 35 points, was it?
35-24.
On Leinster in the RDS in January, essentially one of the hardest months of the year to play rugby, when the ball is probably at its most difficult to handle. You have to give, I suppose, huge credit to Connacht for their capacity, I suppose, to pick weaknesses in the Leinster defence and capitalise on it. In terms of Jack Carty, I think he was exquisite. But I think the challenge for him now is that against Ulster, he was poor, and then he was at the complete other range of the spectrum against Leinster. So people are sitting up and taking notice of him now, but for him to challenge Johnny for an Irish jersey, that has to be consistent. So for him, he has a brilliant opportunity again this weekend, because he'll be in the shop window against for a big game, because Connacht host Leinster, or host Munster, yes, in the sports ground at the weekend. So I think that's a game that Munster traditionally do well in. I think they actually have probably a big success rate in Connacht. So for the Connacht team and for Jack Carty especially, it's a massive opportunity to see, can he back up that performance, because at test level, doing what he did last weekend is great, and it gets you headlines, but you need to be able to do that consistently. Obviously not to that probably Roy the Rover standard, 15 points would be a good outcome. He doesn't need to go 25 points this weekend, but he's their points accumulator. I think it was probably I read a few articles, I think Andy Friend described it very well, as the fact that it was probably his placed ball kicking that was most impressive at the weekend, because he has been a little bit inconsistent off the tee, and if he's to kick goals for Ireland under pressure, he's got to be nailing them at club level, and he looked like he had great control and composure in his kicking game at the weekend.
If I can put you into like your coach's mindset here in terms of man management, what would Andy Friend be doing to kind of put the confidence in him that he can go on and do this every single week, and that he should be there in an Ireland squad to bring him up to that level where, as you say, we're not looking back at an Ulster game last week and saying, God, he wasn't great there, exactly, but he was brilliant against Leinster. Like, what would you necessarily be doing with a player? What would you be saying to them?
Yeah, I think it's a massive opportunity for Jack to grow now, because no doubt in the corner of his mind and all week was the fact that he was coming up against Johnny Sexton, and that's a big challenge to any young 10 and any other 10 in Ireland, because Johnny's been doing the business for so long for Leinster, and it's Leinster at home, and he'd have to, I suppose, be able to handle that mentally first before he can turn that into a performance. But going forward, I think he has a great opportunity to grow his game and get consistently better. And there are similarities, I think, where it may be interesting for him too. He could have a little look at Finn Russell, because for me, they could be quite similar players in the fact that Jack plays very instinctively, and I think there isn't a better player in the world that plays instinctively than Finn Russell, and his attack and kicking game and his capacity to play at the line is really, really good. And I see similar traits in Jack Carty and his capacity to do that. I think we have seen him before, breaking into the World Cup squad and going to the World Cup. I think he most definitely has the talent, maybe. And I think there's a lot of good people in Connacht Rugby that are probably advising him now, and I think he's kind of hopefully turned the corner mentally to realise it's my time now. This is kind of when I need to kick on, I need to put pressure, and I have to, because you don't get into Irish camps by the first time you knock on the door. You have to do it consistently, especially in a number 10 jersey, and I think he's putting in performances that everyone is kind of going, whoa, this is a different Jack Carty. But I think if he does that consistently, he most definitely will be in the Irish squad.
Would you be recommending almost that there needs to be a bit more arrogance about his game when he's on the pitch, or is that just not his style? And if you were to try get him to do that, you might lose you might lose all the other things that all the good things.
It's perception against reality. On the outside, sometimes you get the perception that he could be very relaxed, but that's maybe an inaccurate comment, because we don't know the guy. It's the similar, I suppose, comments have been thrown at Lopez from Claremont, the fact that genetically his body shape is that way, and he's meant to be an unbelievable worker in the gym and trains the house down. But people are sloppy in their commentary about him, and the fact that he doesn't look like Ronaldo, the fact that he carries a little bit of excess body fat, but that doesn't, you can't have preconceived ideas about players in that regard. I don't know Jack too well. I've had a few discussions with him over the years, hoping that he'd kick on, and he has kicked on. But I think, listening to his snippets of his own interview, he's got to control what he can control. But the easiest thing for him is to perform like he did last weekend, as opposed to sometimes missing a kick on the axis of a 15-metre. That I think younger players or people that are trying to make the breakthrough they underestimate I think when you're trying to, I suppose, on a performance graph, when you're trying to go steady performance, excellent performance, if you can then, after an excellent performance, you can have a steady performance and another steady performance and then a good performance. I think that's where you make progress. What happens sometimes if you go excellent performance and then the following week you have a 2 or a 3 out of 10 and it kills all the good work and actually sets you further back, because I think what happens in coaches' minds is that it's very hard to select a guy that is unreliable. And I'm not saying that about Jack Carty at all. I'm just trying to make the point that sometimes by pushing it too hard, you can self-implode. What he needs to do against Munster now is have a solid game. And if he has a solid game, that's progress.
Yeah, and it was bang on this time 2 years ago that he put himself, first of all, into the kind of international recognition where it was actually the game against Leinster as well, where he was unbelievable, and Connacht should have won and threw away a big lead with probably 10, 12 minutes to go, and then got his kind of call up into the Six Nations squad, and all 10 of his caps came in that calendar year of 2019 from Six Nations through to the World Cup. I would imagine there's probably, I know he was saying it in the interview we had with him there, that if he doesn't get called up and he's playing well, he's okay with it because he's just happy in his game. But I would imagine there'd have to be a bit of eagerness to get back into an Ireland shirt, so that the 2019 World Cup isn't the kind of the lingering memory of international rugby.
Yeah, of course. He's got a comment like that because he plays his rugby in Ireland, and he's a respectful guy, but he'd be fuming. And if you're not fuming, there's something wrong with you. So, he's a competitor. He wants to win, but he obviously puts the team first, and that's what good tens do. He realises that, if Connacht go well, he has a better chance of being in an Irish team, and it's of interest to him also because we all know too, if your team is going forward, your halfbacks look better. So the more Connacht Pack goes forward, the better himself, and they've got 2 good nines there that will look good. So of course it'll hurt, but it's important that I think sometimes people, you gotta keep producing consistently to play Test rugby. It's a step up from Pro 14 to playing a Test match, especially in Millennium Stadium or Stade de France or Twickenham or Murrayfield. It's very, very different to playing a so-called Test game for Ireland against the Tier 2 nation in the Aviva. It's different, completely different, Neil.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, as we've kind of said for the last few months, there's a gap in the market for an Irish out half to nail his place down and put himself firmly as, for now anyway, maybe the backup to Johnny Sexton, but to be a long-term heir. Yeah, exactly. There is huge opportunities because, between the ages of 28 to probably 30, you peak as a 10. And so obviously all the guys that are looking to try and get into the number 2 slot, they're all on, none of them are near 30 yet. So there's a great opportunity for one of them to grasp it. And I think that's what Irish rugby needs, because they most definitely need Johnny performing, but also with that, it's a 23-man game at this stage, and that with the turmoil and when it's the attritional rate of Test rugby for 80 minutes, it's highly unlikely that the fellow that you start with finishes the game. Those days are over in rugby. It's just become 2 men sharing the job. Mm-hmm. Ronan O'Gara, been an absolute pleasure speaking to you again, as always, and a happy New Year to you, and a very best of luck against Racing 92 this weekend.
Good man, Neil. Thank you.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what